Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem. Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to a very special episode of Submission Radio. Denis Karatov here with Kacper and Denis. A bit of a breakdown episode of all the crazy stuff that happened over the weekend in the world of MMA, Cass.
Yeah, we're thinking about doing something a little bit different this time. We imagine there's a lot of new people joining us this week who may not have listened to the show before. Normally, the format is we get about 3 to 4 guests on the show. We do interviews and then we do breakdowns. It's been a little bit of a different landscape in MMA, so we figured, you know what? The fans have been treated to 2 big events over the weekend in World Series of Fighting 23 and Bellator Dynamite. We figured, you know what? We're not going to get as many guests this time. We're going to get David St. Martin from MMAfighting.com. He will be breaking down World Series of Fighting 23 with us. He's an interesting guy. And then Frank Trigg, legend himself, he will be joining us, not for an interview, but to break down Bellator Dynamite with us and talk about the card. And we're also going to be talking to Frank about a whole bunch of things in roundtable format, such as Nick Diaz and such as Fedor signing over to the new Japanese promotion, let's call it Pride 2.0. So it's more of a roundtable discussion show, and I can't tell you how lucky we are to have Frank to join us for this one, and of course David St. Martin. So it's a big juicy show, guys.
Yeah, it's a huge one, and the heartbreak will ensue, I'm sure, later on in the episode as we break down our emotions about Fedor never going to the UFC. Now,
yes.
Guys, before we jump into all the breakdowns, for all the new listeners out there, www.facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS is the place to go if you want to like us on Facebook. We like to share our opinions and all the breaking news in the world of MMA on the page, so give us a like. And a quick shout out to Gary Siegel, who is a man from Michigan, always putting up great comments. Thank you for following us. And also on YouTube, if you guys aren't listening on YouTube, we do have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Submission Radio AU. It's where we put up our episode, but also there's a technique of the week that comes out every Wednesday, and also a bunch of extra content. Now, we've been all over this UFC 193 press tour of Australia. We were across Melbourne and Sydney, and we've got all that stuff for you up right now. So there's a Q&A that wasn't actually even released by the UFC themselves that happened in Sydney, which is up on the channel. We just put it up last week. Yesterday. We put it up yesterday. There's also a massive press conference from Etihad Stadium in Melbourne with Ronda Rousey, Dana White, Joanna, a whole bunch of other fighters, Holly Holm, and you guys can check that out as well. It's got a lot of interesting parts to it, and we broke down a couple of interesting clips. Now, not really as relevant, but, Dana White speaks about Fedor possibly being on the card. Now we know it's not going to happen. But also, Ronda Rousey discusses her opinion on the Nevada State Athletic Commission about their suspension for Nick Diaz. So lots of stuff on the channel, Cass.
There's absolutely heaps, and don't forget, guys, this one comes out, or this podcast and every single show comes out on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud, pretty much anywhere when podcasts can be found. Don't forget to give us a rating, guys, if you guys have the time. We do appreciate 5 stars, but there's absolutely no pressure. You give us whatever rating you feel that we are worthy of. It does help us in terms of iTunes and Google and SEO and all that kind of stuff. And iTunes looking at it going, this isn't complete garbage, so we're going to promote this this show. Just want to say a big thank you. We've been meaning to do this for a few weeks now, but just as some of the recent reviews, New Bomb Turk Jr. From the US, big thank you for your 5-star review. Jeebus or Jeebers from Australia, save us Jeebers. Thank you very much for your 5-star review. Carl Prios, been meaning to thank you for a long time. This guy's always hitting us up on Twitter at SubmissionUS. Thank you so much for the review. Sagglebud from the US, interesting name. Thank you very much for 5 stars. And Shalafi Rage from the US also. All those guys gave us 5 stars recently, and you can too. It's very easy. So we appreciate that, guys. But without further ado, let's get down to business. I'm going to be breaking down World Series of Fighting with David St. Martin. And Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's on the line now.
We have journalist extraordinaire, the man behind MMA Fighting's morning report, David St. Martin, joining us for the breakdown. Dave, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
No problem. Thank you guys for having me.
It's a great pleasure. We read the morning report all the time, so it's great to have you finally on the show. All right, we're going to dive straight into it. First thing I want to talk about on World Series of Fighting 23, the controversy on the prelims. Now, I don't know how many people watched the prelims of World Series of Fighting 23. It was a fine event. On the prelims, a bit of controversy. Vagab Vagabov. Parents weren't very creative with the names, but he versed a man called Brian Grinnell. There's a bit of controversy after Vagabov was dominating Grinnell against the cage. He basically pinned him against the cage, for those who didn't see, unloaded with a bunch of punches and knees to the head. Once the referee stopped the fight, Vagabov actually threw a kick to his opponent's face and slapped him on the back of the head. In my opinion, absolutely disgusting, and I think it may warrant being suspended, possibly even cut from the promotion. Guys, I just want to get your thoughts on the whole incident. Oh, sorry, we'll start with you first, David.
Yeah, it looks pretty awful. The ref is kind of clearly trying to place himself between the two guys. I don't understand what he could have been thinking, unless the ref had not been a little bit more forceful and pushing him away and giving him verbal commands. Maybe he doesn't speak incredible English. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think anyone who's probably competed at this level is probably familiar enough with how the stoppage process works. So it's one of those things that you just don't really understand, and you can't really play devil's advocate too much about what could have possibly been in his mind when he did that.
Great points, Dave. And, all of us here on the conversation have been in some kind of sparring in one time or another. Me and Kacper, not quite as good as you, David, but, we've been in the gym, we've done our sparring, and there's nothing more dangerous than a guy that doesn't know the rules. Cass, I agree with you. I'm going to go one step further. I just don't want to, not just the suspension, I want to see this guy cut from the promotion. It's just terrible for the sport. All of us try and make the sport look as legitimate as possible. We've been fighting these people here in Victoria, trying to get it legalized. And you have guys like this coming in with this thuggish mentality. Whether it was a mix-up or not, I think that's it. You only get an opportunity like that once. Imagine if he actually hurt the guy. That's the big thing, It's a dangerous thing to do, throwing kicks at a downed opponent. I want to see the guy cut from the promotion. Cass, you want to see suspension or the guy being thrown out. Is that right?
Well, I was kind of throwing it out there. I was dipping my toe into suspension, but to be honest, I think he should be cut as well. I mean, he's not a big star like Palhares, which I don't really think makes a difference, to be honest. But the way he did it, he just came off, for lack of a better term, came off like a jerk. There was a kick to the face, there was a sloppy kick, and then there was a slap on the back of the head. So it clearly looked like he was trying to punk his opponent, and there's just no room for that kind of stuff in MMA. Like you mentioned, especially after all the stuff that people have gone through to get the sport or the cage legalized here in Victoria, it's still illegal in Perth, Australia. I mean, New York, that's a big one as well, and we just can't have things like that happening. Chael Sonnen was yelling about the referee to get in there. I think the ref could have stood in front of Vagabov once he stopped the fight, but to be honest, I think he was just as shocked as everyone else, so I can't really blame the ref. I mean, it's not as bad a job by the ref as, say, Steve Mazzagatti with Palhares, because at least with Palhares, you knew what to expect. With this guy, I think this just came completely out of the blue, but I'm fine for having him cut from the promotion.
Yeah, interesting to see what happens there. Now, kicking off the main card, guys, Brian Foster versus LaRue Burley. It was Brian Foster, a guy that you guys might recognize, the viewers might have recognized from the UFC. He's had wins over guys like Matt Brown and Brock Larson. I mean, the guy has had some ups and downs. Before I go to you, Dave, to ask about your thoughts on the fight, Cass, there were some health issues for Brian throughout his career.
Yeah, well, he actually left the UFC after his win over Matt Brown. He had a brain hemorrhage, right? I believe he was supposed to fight Sean Pearson at UFC, I think 139 or 129. He had a brain hemorrhage, had to have brain surgery. The brain surgery was a success, and then he was making his comeback, and then an accidental groin strike to the balls left him with a broken testicle, basically. And the UFC cut him for health issues. How crazy, huh?
Wow.
Indeed.
So that's some crazy stuff there. And then he obviously came back. He's been fighting in smaller organizations, did lose against Jake Shields, and put on an amazing performance at this event. David, what did you think of his performance?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see too much of it. It was 32 seconds or something, right? So scored a pretty clean knockout, pretty back and forth until he hit that knockout. So kind of looking forward to seeing him in the lightweight tournament if they can ever get that sanctioned somewhere, perhaps. So
yeah,
I kind of like the chatter back and forth between him and Gaethje already, kind of setting the stage for it. So we'll have to see if he can kind of make his way through.
Well, Foster's already gone ahead and said that he's going to knock Justin Gaethje the fuck out, which, I mean, I'm already excited considering what he did to LaRue Burley. I mean, for those who didn't see, it was a vicious knockout. It was a great moment from Chael Sonnen, well, not necessarily from Chael Sonnen, but just in general, when Chael compared his skills to Dan Henderson as a wrestler who likes to strike. Just moments before Foster landed, huge right hand. And the funny thing is, LaRue gestured bring it to Foster, and Foster answered with a 1-2 that appeared to hurt LaRue. Both of the guys swung wildly after some short clinch work. LaRue's hands were absolutely nowhere to be found. They were way down. If Foster hit him, he cut a nice angle and hit him with a big straight right. The strange thing that I found about it was that LaRue was completely out, yet he was contesting the stoppage. He was stiff-legged and everything. Did anybody at all think there was any room for contesting the stoppage, Dennis? What did you think?
Oh, well, I didn't quite think that, Cass. You're not going to see me at the front of the picket line with a big sign. I mean, maybe him contesting it was a part of his concussion. Who knows? What about you, Dave?
No, there's no way that he should have even argued. If you wake up and your back is against the cage and you're on your butt, don't wake up standing, and there's no room for you to really complain when you come to. I've come to a couple times of just being choked out and just looking up at the ceiling, and I'm not going, what happened? Why? How did I lose that? It's just the way it happens. How can you? I don't understand. I've never been KO'd like this, so I don't understand I only have the choke unconsciousness come to. I don't have the KO come to experience, so I can't really say, but it is a little confusing to say.
I've had the choke unconsciousness come to as well, Dave. It's almost like a sweet wake up. I don't know. It's very different. I wouldn't want to experience the knockout one. It looks brutal.
No,
yeah.
exactly.
Overall, I think Foster is one of those guys that the World Series, like you guys said, World Series of Fighting, the division's going to really need, because he's got credibility. I mean, he's got wins over some big guys. And you can market him like the guy that did beat Matt Brown, the guy that did do well in the UFC. And unfortunately, due to the brain hemorrhage, he's no longer with the company. But he can become as relevant as he ever was with World Series of Fighting. They do need fighters like that, so it's good to see. Now, moving on to the next fight, guys. Phoenix Jones versus Roberto Yong. Now, Phoenix Jones is a superhero. Oh, he was a superhero in Seattle, I believe. He walked around. There were documentaries about this guy. It was just unbelievable and really made me wonder why I never became a superhero on the streets here in Melbourne, Australia. There might still be an opportunity for me, but I could never quite get a mask as cool as Phoenix Jones. Just a lot of the Batman child masks that I could find at Kmart. Now, this fight here, Phoenix Jones, what a personality, but he just wasn't very lucky in his last fight. Now, before we go into it, what were you guys expecting from his performance at this event? David, did you think he was going to bounce back and win this one?
Yeah, I assumed that they would, have some favorable matchmaking for him, and can I get him back on track? And it looked a little rough in the early goings. The fight lasted 3 minutes, and I think Phoenix Jones was probably losing a good portion of that. In the striking, he was just getting very hittable. Not really impressed with his footwork, things like that, and I'll let you guys weigh in before I go on a rant about that submission. So.
Well, Cass, I mean, they were talking about how he was working with Matt Hume and Demetrius Johnson at AMC. What did you think of his skills? Do you agree with David? Was there a big gap in the striking?
I think that Jones was having trouble with Roberto Young's speed. He was looking to sway a lot of the shots and he was getting caught. His opponent, to me, it looked like they were looking for a squash match. Phoenix Jones obviously is a big star. He's one of the more covered fighters in World Series of Fighting, other than the ex-UFC guys, and he's a superhero like you mentioned, so he's bound to get a lot of attention. He's a guy that they want to really build up, and obviously, you go the sort of Scott Coker Bellator route where you feed fighters like that, guys, and even though Roberto Young was 10 pounds lighter, Phoenix Jones was having a lot of trouble with him. I mean, all I can say, if you're expecting Demetrius Johnson, it's definitely not what you're going to get. He's a big guy. He's a really athletic guy. He looks like he's got a lot of raw athleticism, but he needs to work on his technique. So this was the fight where if he loses, I mean, you're basically screwed. But if you win, okay, great, you're back on the sort of train. And I think he got a lot of haters from what he said after his win. I think he got a lot of haters on Twitter and social media saying that he shouldn't be fighting World Series of Fighting. What did you think of the actual fight, Dennis?
Yeah, well, I would agree with you guys. Phoenix Jones got very, very lucky. There were parts in that fight where it looked like Roberto was going to take him out. I just wasn't impressed with the striking. It just seems like there's a really huge gap there with the striking. When it comes to grappling, obviously, he's a good grappler, but there's just a huge discrepancy in his striking, which makes me wonder, when he was beating up these guys in the streets of Seattle, was he just taking them down one by one and trying to submit them? Like, Batman doesn't take people down and put them in triangle chokes all the time. So where's that superhero striking? Yeah, I wasn't that impressed with his performance. I mean, he did get the win, but there's still a lot of improvement left to do. Let me ask you something, David. You know, you're a guy that's been in and out of some of the elite gyms there in America. What do you think? Do you think Phoenix Jones can make the leap and fill out that gap and become a competitive fighter on his feet? Do you think he can make those adjustments and make those advancements so that people could be impressed with his striking?
Yeah, I mean, especially training with Matt Hume and just even having DJ around to kind of work on that. I don't see why not. I think it's easier to go from having a great grappling base to develop striking than vice versa. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you can find examples of, plenty of grapplers who develop striking, Koscheck, GSP, guys like that, but it's harder to find sort of elite examples of guys who developed, came from elite striking backgrounds. I know people that train with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and he came from an elite striking background and is developing his grappling game, but it's just it's harder to, it's a steeper learning curve, and it's a little bit harder to kind of get that part of your game up. So I think there's hope for him. Not incredibly impressed with the submission. I don't want to rail on it too much, but I think plenty of fighters I saw on Twitter were kind of making fun of him about it. So
yeah, well, I mean, that's the interesting thing. People didn't really quite know what the submission was. Cass, I mean, you had a chance to look over the footage. What exactly happened? What was the submission, do you think?
Well, so Jones eventually got the fight to the ground where he wanted. He got the north-south and went for what looked like a Kimura or armbar setup. He rolled Yong over onto his back and locked in the leg scissors. The armbar wasn't actually locked in. And the first thing I thought was, this is not something that's really going to work on elite fighters. If you look closely, you can see that Jones, it looked to me like he stuck his knees onto Yong's shoulders and actually pushed away with his legs. So it looked like there was a bit of leverage there, tremendous amount of pressure on Yong's neck. I don't know, it looked almost like it was the fact that Yong's head was being pulled away from his body that made him tap, but it's not exactly something that you're going to be taught up by John Danaher or Renzo Gracie. I mean, you said you didn't want to rail on it too much, Dave. What did you think? Is this one of those submissions that we'll see once and probably never see again? I mean, it's a leg scissors. I believe... Who got caught with
Pendred.
the leg?
Pendred almost hit it on Sean Spencer.
Yeah.
If you guys remember, it's what I like to call a troll move. Mm-hmm. It's something that you would do. It's something that I would do to like a white belt who comes in and just is like being kind of a dick. Mm. It's one of those moves that you're not going to catch your friends in. You're not going to catch someone of equal kind of standing and footing with you. It's kind of one of those just kind of like dick moves. It's like a calf slicer, bicep slicer. It's a troll move. It's a move that you do to someone that you just feel like trolling. You're literally trolling this person, and to see a leg scissor get hit in one of the top premier shows, which I do consider World Series Fighting one of the top shows. It's pretty wild, and that's how I reacted on Twitter. I didn't want to say anything too crazy, but I said it's wild to see this. And then if you look at Danny Castillo's tweets, who is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he just was beside himself, tweeting out the Frank Mir face meme and how could you tap to that, and it's one of those just moves that you kind of go, that's not a good one to go out for, but you get caught.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I feel like Phoenix Jones, look, he did what he had to do to get the win, but I feel like he won by sheer size. Like, when he rolled over Yong, you could just see that, like, on the feet, Yong was doing really well. He really had the speed advantage. He was catching Phoenix Jones with a lot of good shots. Had it stayed standing for the next few rounds, I think Phoenix Jones may have been in trouble, but once he got to the ground, I mean, these guys looked like they were 1 or 2 weight classes apart, and Phoenix Jones just almost ragdolled him. And yeah, it's one of those moves, it's like when you tap to a crank, like someone doesn't have the guillotine in training, but they're cranking your neck. You're like, I'll just tap. I don't want to get my neck, injured in this. And there was another really bad head scissors or leg scissors. It was in a female fight. It was years ago. I don't know if you guys remember. And Kim Winslow was refereeing, and the girl got put to sleep. I think it may have been Randy Couture's ex-wife, Kim Couture, and she got put to sleep really badly. And there was like, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 seconds where the leg scissors were still in, and it didn't get stopped fight. And people, I think that's what really got people on the Kim Winslow hate bandwagon. But yeah, look, considering that Phoenix Jones trains with a Matt Hume and Demetrius Johnson, you got to think that he'll improve in the future, and he's got the athleticism, and he just needs to work on the technique now.
Yeah, for sure. And the Kim Winslow hate wagon just keeps on rolling. I mean, she's had some interesting performances since then. Now, before we jump over to the next fight, guys, there was a hilariously awkward moment where Chael Sonnen wrapped up things with Ray Sefo. There was some interesting back and forths in a bit of an awkward situation there. Cass, break it down for us. What happened?
So Ray Sefo, he's a guy that we've had the chance to interview, and he's a really, really nice guy. I would dub him a sweetheart because he is. Really nice man. He's a huge, gentle giant. But when you get him in front of the mic, he's not necessarily... How do I put it? I feel like
he's Joe Rogan.
He's not Joe Rogan, you know what I mean? He's not necessarily going to get me... He's a guy that I come to for life advice, not necessarily to hype up a fight. And Chael Sonnen wisely picked up on this, and he was like, rather than getting a prediction, they were talking about Justin Gaethje, Luis Palomino too, and he said, rather than getting a prediction, you can watch it later on tonight. Back to you, Todd. And I thought, wow, that was brilliant. Good on him for sort of cutting it short. That little interview, that back and forth, didn't need to go any further. But instead, the camera didn't cut away and instead stayed on both of them for like, I don't know, the next 10 seconds. They both looked around. Chael Sonnen had this like smile as he finished his line, and then that smile just faded away as they're both looking at the cameraman like, I'm going to kill you if you don't cut away. Why are you guys, still on me? So, and that happened a few times. So I think they need to work on, World Series of Fighting need to work on those cues. When someone says back to you, Todd, they got to cut back to Todd.
Yeah, great job by Chael Sonnen there. He's great on the mic. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but let's jump over to the next fight. Timur Valiev versus Tito Jones. Now, Timur's a guy that people have, a lot of great things to say about. He's had some great fights in World Series of Fighting. Dave, what did you think of this fight?
Yeah, I think the first 2 rounds, Tito was on the move. He just would not really engage. He didn't want to find that range. It was a little bit, you could see Timur getting a little bit frustrated as he, started gesturing a little bit. And, I think once Timur kind of found that space to work in, he finally started turning things around. But, Tito did not seem to want to even get into a sort of counter-fighting range. He was really kind of just moving around a ton, and it was a little bit confusing. So it definitely took a little while for the fight to start picking up.
Well, I was going to ask if you thought that was a wise decision, because Tito dropped the biggest success Tito had, and it was really his only success. He dropped Valiev early in the first, but he didn't capitalize. Tito was very content, seemingly, to just hang on the outside of the cage and use lateral movement without actually throwing much. I mean, to me, if I can describe to people who didn't watch it, it's almost like Tito was waiting for the opportunity to throw that one perfect shot, but the shot never really came. It was kind of like, how a lot of people criticize Lyoto Machida's fights, and they don't necessarily... A lot of people say, Lyoto Machida dances around too much and things like that. But usually with Lyoto Machida, you do get some really good counters, and you get that, oftentimes, that eventual brutal knockout. It's always leading somewhere. But it was almost like a Lyoto Machida fight without any counters, and really without very many shots thrown. What did you think about that game plan?
Me, personally?
Yeah, sorry, Dave, yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah, no, I can sympathize with it, but you have to bring something. You have to keep Timur guessing. You have to throw some jabs out there. You have to do something. It was waiting for Timur to engage, but then bolting whenever he sort of threatened to come into range. It was pretty clear that I think he really did not want to mess with any of the grappling that Timur has. So it was just kind of frustrating to watch.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, the thing is with Timur, the guy is just a non-stop mover. I mean, you'd think he'd get tired at some point in this fight, but even in that third round, I mean, he was still going strong. When the fight was going into the third round, I just want to get a quick opinion, a quick snapshot of what you guys were thinking. I'll start with you, Dave. Who did you think was going to win the fight when it was going to the third round? Who were you picking and possibly winning that third round and winning the fight?
I never really thought that Timur wouldn't win the fight. I think Chael said that he had it 1-1 going into the third, but, I just never really, he's never given me really any sense that he can't beat the guy who's standing across from him in World Series of Fighting. He's just typically outmatched whoever he's up against, even if it's decisions and things like that. I just, I never thought that he wouldn't find a way to kind of pick it up.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, I can understand going 1-1 into that third round just purely because Tito did drop Valiev in the first, but he didn't necessarily do much else in that first. I could even see Valiev getting the first 2, and in the third round, I mean, it was pretty much a complete blow-up. Valiev got him to the ground and controlled him. Chael Sonnen, I think, summed it up perfectly in terms of Tito Jones. He said he's got to make a fist Todd and throw it in a forward direction at the person standing across from him. I don't want to rag on Tito, but I just think if there was more output, he may have had more success, but he just, I don't know, he never really seemed in the fight. Valiev, he won the third round. Great work ethic from Valiev. That's all I can really say. Guys, let's move on to Dave Branch and Teddy Holder because we are running low on time. The co-main event, Dennis, I want to get your thoughts first on Dave Branch winning the light heavyweight title and becoming a 2-time champion in the division, or in the company.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, if you think about it, it's quite a big feat. And we had him on the show previously a few weeks ago. He was talking about how it would put him up sort of with some of the all-time greats. I don't think it does. I think being a 2-time champion World Series of Fighting is very special. I don't think it's the same as being a 2-time UFC champion, or maybe even in Bellator and World Series Fighting, pretty even for me. So 2-time UFC champion. It's not the same for me. The thing is, Teddy Holder, he had a good fight against Thiago Silva in the sense that he took it at late notice and he knocked him out. But he just wasn't as much of a challenge for Branch as if Thiago was able to go through and beat Teddy Holder, if you guys know what I mean. So when he rocked up to this fight, I mean, he wasn't even 205. He was like 202 point something. It was obvious that this wasn't his probably best weight class. And David Branch was the middleweight champion. So for me, I really felt like Branch is going to walk away the champion. But nevertheless, it was a big feat for him to win both titles. What about you, Dave? What did you think of the fact that now he's a double champion in World Series of Fighting?
I think it's pretty incredible. I think he, just seeing, how he's kind of progressed. I think this is hasn't lost a fight since 2012. And, the sort of impression in your mind of Dave Branch is, it's pretty, tainted by his up and down UFC career. So you kind of look at that, you look at his record and you go, wow, man, he's really kind of gotten it together. Super cool guy. I used to train at Henzo's. He trains at Henzo's. I just remember him, being incredibly positive, incredibly motivated, and kind of always pushing forward. So it's nice to see a career resurgence.
Let me ask you something. You were in the gym with him. What was he like on the mat? How good is he on the ground? Because he looks amazing, but in the gym, how amazing is he?
Oh, I never personally grappled with him because I'm a child and these are adults. I'm literally like a toddler when it comes to this. I've been training for a long time and I'm still not even close to these guys. But just being around in the gym and him working out and things like that. And Henzo Gracie black belt, working with John Danaher, working with guys that come in there every day. He's got Tonin, he's got Eddie Cummings, he's got Frankie Edgar, he's got GSP, he's got Igor Gracie, Hollis Gracie, Gregor Gracie. It's just, I didn't expect anything different from what David Branch did.
Yeah, I would agree. When we had him on the show, he spoke about how he really turned his life around and his life wasn't headed where he wanted it to, and he really changed things. So, I know, Dennis, you mentioned that it's not the same as being a 2-time champion in the UFC, but even still, like you mentioned, Dave, World Series of Fighting is a premier promotion, and it's not necessarily his fault that the divisions aren't filled up yet like they are in, say, I don't even know if I'd say Bellator, but the UFC. He's beaten all comers, he's beaten all his challengers, and if it was easy, everybody would be holding multiple titles in lesser organizations, and you don't see that. Look, with Teddy Holder, I didn't think Teddy Holder was Dave Branch's biggest challenge. Dave did what he had to do. He was patient. He took the fight to the ground where it needed to be. Being that Teddy's essentially a power puncher and Dave trains, like you mentioned, with Henzo Gracie, the advantages were all in Dave's favor once it hit the ground. I fully expected him to beat him once it hit the ground. One thing I will mention, during that rear naked choke, it looked to me like Teddy didn't quite know how to defend the choke. At one point when Branch had the choke locked in, Holder was pushing on Branch's elbow instead of attacking on the wrists. But nevertheless, I mean, that's a huge feat, being the light heavyweight champion and the middleweight champion in a company like World Series of Fighting. And it looks like they're trying to promote that Clifford Starks fight. I'm curious, what do you guys want to see from Dave Branch in the future?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening around World Series of Fighting, and there's a couple of guys that are going to be fighting next month. I'm interested to see how they'll fit in the whole picture. Obviously, you got Vinny Margalesh versus Matt Hamill. That's World Series of Fighting 24. I wonder if they're going to fit in there. And also, Tyrone Spong. I don't know what the deal is with the guy because obviously he was injured I think he's still signed to World Series of Fighting from what I understand, and he's in the light heavyweight division. He's also someone I'd be interested in seeing Dave Branch fight, because Dave's got the obviously awesome ground game while Tyron's an amazing striker. So it's almost a fight of grappler versus striker, although Tyron's been working on his ground game and Dave has shown us that he's a good striker as well. I think that could be a good matchup. What about you, Dave?
No, I think, if they can get Vinny, if they can get Tiago, if they can get Spong, those are all interesting fights for people to tune in and watch, sellable fights. So, anytime I think you can get Spong in an MMA match, people are going to tune in. From the leg break and things like that, there's a lot of intrigue around him. And is he still getting in there? But, Spong has always characterized himself as a money weight. So he goes where the money goes, and it's hard for me to imagine that the World Series of Fighting is going to be able to bid him away from some of the other offers that he might be able to catch in boxing. And he's basically fighting some very low-level guys overseas right now, and he's I would imagine fairly comfortable making a little bit of money knocking out absolute. I don't want to call anyone tomato can, but the guys that are professional kind of record builders, if I can put it that way. So I don't know that he's, it would be tough, but I'd love to see Spawn get back in there.
Before we cut to Justin Gaethje and Luis Palomino, do you guys think it's an issue for World Series of Fighting that they've got a two-divisional champion that's looking to take a break? Because after he won the fight, he said he's going to take a break, he's going to heal up. Who knows how long that's going to be? It'll most likely be for the rest of the year. He's holding both belts, and yet he wants to have a break. What do you guys think about that? Dave, I'll cut to you.
I don't know how much of a big deal it is for me just because of how spread out their events are. You've got some other champions that I love to watch fight. You've got Gaethje, you've got Marlon Moraes. You just put on way less shows. If this was the UFC, I think it'd be a disaster. You can't have a two-division champ there, So I don't know how big of a deal it would be, just because they just don't put on a massive amount of shows. You can kind of cater around to putting your stars on cards.
It's one of those things, though, where I'm looking at the middleweight division of World Series of Fighting. Apart from Clifford Starks, there's just not many guys that you even think about putting up against Dave Branch. So I'm guessing at the moment, I agree with you, Dave. I think this is a good opportunity for Branch to at least keep a regular schedule fighting. And having both titles will give him that opportunity to at least headline a few events in a year and, make a bit of money and be able to get his face out there. Because looking at the middleweight division right now, there's just not many names. I'm looking at the roster. There's just not many names apart from Clifford that really make sense. But I think, Cass, as the divisions build, it will be a big deal if you want to take a break. I mean, if these guys had a lot more credible middleweights and a lot more credible light heavyweights that are on the cusp of a title shot like in the UFC, then you got to work overtime. I think at the moment it's not a big deal, but if these two divisions build up, who knows? Maybe Branch might have to make a choice between that division or the other. But I just don't see that happening for a few more years in World Series of Fighting, because it's just tough to get the big names in middleweight and light heavyweight, because those are some of the big money divisions. What do you reckon, Cass?
Well, I actually think it's probably a perfect time to do a tournament, because that's what we're doing in lightweight, and I feel like nothing gets people faster to a title than a tournament. You can knock off two guys, or whoever wins the tournament has essentially beaten 2, 3, maybe 4, depending on how long the bracket is, and then you can say, well, this guy's on a 2-fight win streak, or 3-fight win streak, 4-fight win streak, therefore he's eligible to challenge for the title. So they can get a few middleweights, build a tournament. Meanwhile, that'll take a while to happen. Meanwhile, Dave Branch is either resting, and then maybe he comes back and he fights Clifford Starks. In the meantime, we'll have a clear-cut challenger for the title. I think that could work. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, no, I enjoy tournaments as long as they're not in one night. But I think they're a great way for people to kind of tune in. I wasn't a big fan of the Bellator style tournaments, but it's a little bit of a different set of circumstances over there, World Series of Fighting. So I wouldn't have any real problem with them doing a 4 or 8 man tournament to find a next contender.
Yeah. I'm sort of meh on the tournament just because I don't think they've got the middleweights to do it. I'd like to see him go out there and sign some more middleweights before they do this tournament, because I'm just looking at their The ones that I have now, they've got, according to Wikipedia, they've got 10 middleweights, and apart from Clifford Starks and a couple of others, there's just not really any even name. I like a tournament with a bit of name value, even if they could find a veteran from the UFC or just someone with some name value to throw in there, like they do with Thiago for the light heavyweight one. I just think it adds a little bit more excitement. But look, we'll see what happens with that one, guys. Let's move over to the main event. I mean, the big one, Justin Gaethje versus Luis Palomino. We had him on the show, I think it was a month ago or so, talking about the fact that these guys would be fighting each other so soon. There were not many objections to it because the first one was an absolute barn burner. Let me kick it off with you, Dave. You saw that Justin Gaethje was fighting Luis Palomino again so soon. What kind of reaction did you get from that? Did you think it was too soon, or did you forgive it because of the fact that the first fight was so exciting?
Yeah, no, I never really had any impression beyond, yeah, that makes total sense. You know, anytime that you can rebook a fight where both guys are healthy and there's just not an incredible amount of depth in that division, go for it. You know, I kind of hold World Series of Fighting to a little bit lower standard than I would say the UFC. So an instant, you know, or a rematch so soon, I really didn't think twice about it.
Well, let me ask you something, Cass. The fight was almost as exciting as the first one. I mean, they're both super exciting. It's a throw-up. Which one is more exciting? What did you think of the actual fight, Cass?
Right, so going into the fight, there were 3 separate occasions in the first round that I counted where somebody was rocked. Twice when Gaethje was rocked, once when Palomino was hurt, so we're off to a fantastic start already. Before the big right from Gaethje, the uppercut was his money shot. He actually managed to hurt Palomino with it in the first and the second. Both guys traded with absolute fire. It looked like Palomino was tied by the second round, but his heart wouldn't allow him to basically back down. The crazy thing is that Palomino looked to have connected with a big right of his own and stunned Gaethje moments before Justin ended the fight. Although in saying that, the way it sounded, it may be that Palomino actually hit him on the glove. Looked like Gaethje was playing some peekaboo, uncorked a really short but accurate right hook that caught Palomino straight on the jaw and instantly dropped him. Palomino looked unhappy with the stoppage, but when you watch it in live in real time, it almost looked like Palomino may have been making, you know, a comeback for a second, but in the slow motion replay, you see that Gaethje landed a big right straight on the ground that made Palomino go limp for a second, so it was the right call to make. But no, while the fight was happening, I know Palomino was sort of going in there with bursts, taking a short break to catch his breath, then going in there for more bursts. I mean, it was pretty much rounds. I think the last fight ended in, what, the 3rd round? So this is basically rounds 4 and 5, and it started the exact same way the last one ended. So, I mean, I'm not saying they should do an immediate rematch, but if we do have to see this fight later down the road, I'm totally all for it. What did you think, Dave?
Yeah, no, that was my instant reaction was yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing them fight again. You know what I mean? It's just I'm not a huge fan of seeing rematches or third fights, you know, when someone's 0-2. So, but in this case, you know, I really didn't have any issues with it, especially because it was so back and forth. You know, things happen, and Palomino got caught by an excellent shot. And, you know, I do worry about Gaethje a little bit more. I wish he would, you know, I worry about his longevity.
Yeah, well, I think the deal with Gaethje is he needs to work on his defense, especially if he ever wants to make it to the UFC one day. He's a great offensive fighter, but some of his defensive tactics are a little bit not up to standard. And it's almost a case of, you know, him believing that, you know, he's an elite athlete, he can take the punches or whatever, but you can't take that forever. It's going to eventually have an effect on you. Just quickly, guys, your opinion. What did you think? What do you think about this lightweight tournament? Do you want to see Palomino put in this tournament, work his way back up to rematch? You guys just mentioned you wouldn't mind seeing it again. What do you think of the tournament? What did you think of Gaethje's backflip? He almost landed on the guys. We'll start with you, Cass.
I'm all for the backflip. I think Chael Sonnen, you know, he made a big deal about the backflip. I mean, you know, guys are going to do what they're going to do. It's his celebration. It's not like they're going to go and implement a rule saying no more backflips, otherwise you get a paddling. As far as the lightweight the tournament, I'm excited. Like I said, it's a great way to get... There's quite a few decent lightweights there, but no one really stands up above everybody else head and shoulders as, okay, I'm the next big challenger. Brian Foster, he put on a great performance at World Series of Fighting 23, so I think he's got a lot of momentum heading in there. And whoever wins, you know, they're going to get a couple of wins in a row and possibly be crowned the rightful contender. So I'm all for it. Part of me is like, I hope Palomino doesn't go in there and win the whole thing, because then once again, we're going to have to see Palomino. Look, I don't mind seeing this fight later down the track. I just don't want World Series of Fighting 23, their lightweight division, to be a series of rematches between Palomino and Gaethje. So, in saying that, most of the best lightweights are going to be in the tournament. So, I guess in a way you have to, get him in there, right? He's 34. This is one of his last chances of becoming a champ unless he wins this tournament. So I'm just excited to see who they put in there, who's in the brackets, and how it goes.
Yeah, interesting points there, Cass. Now, we are running low on time, so we will have to wrap it up. But before we go, Dave, just want to get your opinion. What did you think of Chael Sonnen's broadcasting skills? Did you like him as a commentator?
Yeah, he's perfect. He keeps you entertained. I don't find him as grating. I know I'm going to take crap for this, but the way Moro slips in some his puns and things like that, it kind of just kills me. So I find it less grating. How about that? Like when Chael is just putting in his little, he needs to ball his fist and throw it at the other gentleman. Things like that are just a little bit more fun. He has the fighting background. He's Chael. It's perfect.
Well, there you go, Cass. Just a couple of comments because we're low on time. Your thoughts on Chael Sonnen's performance?
I think he did a great job. He's a natural in front of the mic. He's got the gift of the gab. This is exactly what Chael should be doing. He provided some great insight during the fights, obviously being a former fighter, high-profile fighter. You want to hear what he has to say. He also added a lot of energy. The only thing that I would say about Chael, the only awkward collar pull was when he was interviewing Luis Palomino, who had just lost what was a huge fight for him, and Chael cut to him by saying, I'm joined by the silver medalists, if you will, and Luis, you are no longer like me. You're no longer undefeated in championship fights. Right. If I'm Luis, I'd be like, I don't want to hear that shit right now. But other than that, I think Chael was very smooth. Even the way he mentioned sponsors. There was a moment where he said something about Alienware, like, wow, if it wasn't for those guys, we would have had to watch a commercial. I'm like, smooth and a company man. So, yeah, I hope he stays.
Well, there you guys go. I like Chael as well, and I personally thought he brought a big event feel to the event because he's a well-known personality and he did a great job. But, guys, let's thank, we don't have an audience here, but me and Casper would like to thank David St. Martin for coming onto the show. You can catch him on Twitter at Saint MMA, and obviously you can check out his extraordinary MMA Fighting.com morning reports. Always interesting, always the place to go if you want to know what to check out from that day when it comes to MMA. Great bunch of clips, great bunch of articles. Always a great collection of what's happening in the world of MMA. And David, thank you so much for joining the show.
No problem. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Cool, guys. Well, we'll be back right after this with the Bellator Breakdown with Frank Trigg.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Alright guys, our next guest is a legend in the sport. He's a UFC veteran, a World Fighting Alliance veteran. He's fought in Pride, Rumble in the Rock, BAMMA. He's fought pretty much everywhere. Strikeforce. He's now also an official UFC Hall of Famer. You can see his fantastic interviews on MMAOddsBreaker.com. He joins us today to break down Bellator 142, also known as Bellator Dynamite. Frank Trigg, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's an absolute...
It's an absolute pleasure, Frank. You and me, Cass, thinking of the same thing. A huge event, and we appreciate you coming on the show to break it down. A big event in the world of MMA. Now, guys, before we get into the actual event itself, I just want to talk a little bit about the event feel, what it felt like to you guys, if you guys like the production value. I'll kick it off with you first, Frank. What did you think about the way Scott Coker put this one together?
Well, because I've been around MMA for so long, it was just more of the same. That's the way Pride was always done. So when you saw Dynamite in Japan, that's how it came out. And so I was actually looking for something a little bit different, but that was exactly the way that it was followed. If you go back and look at the old Fox Sports stuff, you'll actually see where Jake Glazer and I are walking down these long set of steps from the stage where Lenny Hart is going to announce all the fighters, and she calls Jake Glazer and Frank Trigg in. So it's like the same set. It was great to see Lenny back. It was great to have Marlon Allen and Stephen Quadros and the group, everyone calling the fight together like they used to back in the old Pride days. But it really was just the exact same thing. So Coker didn't reinvent the opener. He just brought the best opener that there is possible to have, and that's what Pride used to do. So for me, it was like, okay, once I realized that's what they were doing, I kind of checked out and went back to cooking a little bit of dinner and then waited for them to get done with the intros and went back in again. Because you don't need to see Lenny calling the guys' names you could hear her from the kitchen. It was totally fine.
Yeah. No, I love hearing Lenny, and you instantly get transported back to those Pride days. You said that you were expecting something different. When you say that, do you mean in general you wanted to see something different from Bellator as opposed to, say, the UFC and what other MMA promotions? Or you mean specifically for the event you thought they were going to do something else, and when you saw it you were like, okay, this is just the usual?
Well, because I knew, I'm still pretty dialed into the Japanese MMA scene. I knew the second Gabar was getting ready to announce that he's coming back and doing a new Pride promotion. We'll get into that later because I obviously involved Fedor. But so I knew that was going to happen. I also knew that Couture and Trader had this big, we're getting ready to have a big face-off. So I knew that was happening. I was like, okay, they're pulling out of the stops. Sakuraba was there. Of course, Horace Gracie was there. So you figure that all these old school things are going on. You figure that at some point you're going to do something a little bit different than what we've seen in the past and what the old school diehard fans have seen in the past when it came to watching a Japanese super show or Dynamite. And Coker just did the exact same thing. He just dialed in and did it right. I mean, he did it correct. It wasn't like he did something wrong. I'm not saying it was a bad opener. I'm just saying that I thought that maybe Coker was going to put more of a Scott Coker twist on it. It was all Sakakibara and Kato. That was all like the mindset they were doing, and I was waiting for that Scott Coker twist, that twist that you're like, wow, you don't know what Scott's ever going to do because he's such a mild-mannered character. He's so quiet, like he's almost like a Buddha in that sense. And all of a sudden, boom, he slams something into you. You're like, wow, I didn't see that coming at all. And so I kept waiting for that one thing I didn't see happening. But the one thing I didn't anticipate coming, I kept waiting for that to happen. It just never happened. So, it was a great opener. They definitely blew away the UFC in production value. They definitely changed and made a lot of new school fans become old school fans, made them want to pay attention to how things are shot, from a Japanese mindset. But I still was waiting on that Scott Coker thumbprint, and I just never really got it.
What about you, Cass? What did you think of it? Were you a fan of the way that he went back in time almost to Japan and brought it to America?
Yeah, if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. So I was happy to see things run very much like Pride. The guys coming out at the start, the fireworks. I think as always, the Bellator, their entrances looked good. Or they did the entrances the way they always do. But I actually feel that in Bellator Shamrock vs. Kimbo, they had slightly cheesy and cartoony entrances, whereas this time they were more refined. They were less colorful, more professional looking. I really enjoyed hearing from Stephen Quadros and Mauro Ranello because, once again, it reminded me of Pride, but I'm just not as into kickboxing enough to really appreciate the Glory bouts. There also wasn't any spectacular fights or finishes with the Glory fights. I think that hurt it a little bit. In the future, I would like to see any future Bellator Dynamite shows sped up a little bit. I think the pacing sometimes was a bit off. I found myself often waiting for the show to get back into the MMA fights. I don't know if you were the same, Frank, because I know you said you went back to your dinner, but I think there were a bit, some lulls in action. Also, it would probably help Glory because a lot of the MMA fans may still check out Glory if they like what they saw, but at the moment, Bellator's got the bigger audience, which can help Glory. So, all in all, I enjoyed the spectacle aspect. The whole time I thought, wow, this is a really big deal. I don't know if they pulled it off the way they envisioned it, though. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, no, I agree with you and Frank. There's some aspects of it that I really enjoyed. Other aspects I'm not used to. But overall, I thought Scott Coker did a good job. Now, let's jump into the first fight. King Mo versus Linton Vassell. Frank, we'll kick it off with you. What did you think of this fight? One of the big things that stood out to the audience at home was the fact that the canvas looked like it was covered in ice. There was a lot of slipping and sliding, especially from King Mo. What did you think of the fight, and do you think there was an issue with the canvas?
Well, that's the one thing I really like about the UFC. A buddy of mine, Quentin, actually helps them with the paint that goes on, and the logos are painted on with a particular kind of paint so that the fighters had traction. That was the problem the Bellator is running into is now all of a sudden these big, huge logos that they had to have because of these huge corporate sponsors, that the logos are slick. They're like vinyl, like vinyl tops. So once you get a little bit of sweat on the bottom of your feet, you're all over the place. And you saw that happen with King Mo. But to me, the King Mo fight was very strange because he had him rocked very early in the first round. He had him beat up, and then he just kind of backed off and let it go. And then, of course, later on in the second round, he gets spiked on his head and he gets hurt. And even though he wins the bout, he can't continue into the finals of the tournament. So it becomes a very odd situation that if you have a shot to beat somebody, beat him and be done with it. He had him on the ropes. He just never attacked. Now, I don't know if he saw something, because mind you, I'm at home on the couch. I'm not inside that cage, so I'm not sure if he saw something that I didn't see at home, that he was like, oh, I can't chase him down because he's already recovered, or he's not as hurt as everyone thinks he is. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on inside there that we don't really see at home. But I'm still really kind of disappointed in King Mo that he didn't go out there and get a finish. Like, he totally had him on the ropes, could have finished him late in the first even. Had him rocked early in the first, rocked him again late in the first, and just didn't get to the final point.
Let me ask you something, Frank, before we jump over to you, Cass, for your thoughts on the fight. Who stood out to you out of the 4 competitors in the tournament? Who did you think was going to win it?
Phil Davis.
Okay,
sure.
Phil Davis. So you weren't really giving
sure.
King Mo much of a shot. You thought Phil Davis and then maybe King Mo.
Well, I'm not saying I'm not giving King Mo that much of a shot. I'm just saying that Phil Davis is the better competitor all the way around. But let's not forget, King Mo rocked Basso, who's a great stand-up kickboxer. He rocked him twice in the first round. And Phil fights with his hands down. He's very long. He's very hard to hit. But if Mo hits you with those little 4-inch gloves and tags you from far away, you're going to fall down. So there's always a shot for Mo to be in there. I just think on that night, the way things were playing out and how the fights, who they had to fight previous to, because that's a lot of headache too. Is like when you're dealing with a tournament, it's who you fight the fight before too, because that can make for a long, hard fight. Like one guy got out of there early, one guy had to go the distance. Now they're going to fight again. And it's like, well, they even said it, the commentators even said it, Davis versus, forgive me, I forget his name now off the top of my head, but in the finals, that one guy fought 5 hours ago, one guy fought 2 hours ago. That's a huge difference in rest. So, the fight beforehand goes to it, and I saw, once they pulled the brackets out, I saw the way things were going to work. I was like, it's going to be difficult for Mo to get ahead of Davis just because of the way this fight is going to break down. I thought both guys were going to win against the finals. It was just a question of, who is going to be the better, more, healed up and had enough time to rest and recover athlete, and I just thought that was going to be Phil Davis.
That's a very interesting perspective. What about you, Cass? What did you think of the actual fight?
Yeah, look, I'm with Frank on this one and pretty much everybody else that King Mo, he landed a lot of shots. He rocked Linton Vassell over and over again. It's been covered to death. Look, King Mo said that he didn't want to rush in because he was slipping on the canvas, which is crazy that was such a big factor that he actually, in theory, allegedly affected the fight that much. Linton, he really likes the rear naked choke, so I was actually really impressed with Mo. Once he got spiked on his head, Linton got that really big takedown, and he passed the mount, then he took Mo's back. It was a really worrying situation for Mo, and then Mo did an amazing job of getting out of it, reversing the position, and then taking Linton down himself. So it was a dominant performance by King Mo. I really thought he could have gotten Linton out of there a lot quicker, though. One thing that you mentioned, Frank, and I do also want to get your thoughts on, with Francis Carmont and Phil Davis, obviously one guy fighting 2 hours prior and the other one 5 hours, who gets the advantage there? And as a fighter, how would that affect you? After 5 hours, is the fatigue setting in, or is it more that after 5 hours you're rejuvenated?
It depends on the damage. There's so many factors going involved. If everything else is equal, obviously the guy that has 5 hours of rest is much better than the guy that has 2 hours of rest. When you're in the middle of a training camp and you're doing 2 days, you want to do your second practice 4 hours or more away from your first practice. Because it gives your body full time to get recovered. And also, too, in 2 hours, the adrenaline dump, the adrenal gland dump, the ability to rehydrate, the ability to get food back in your body, you don't have enough time to digest any of it. So it's like really it's all for naught. Like it's going to give you a sense of feeling that you're full, or a sense of feeling that you're putting water back in your system, but nothing's really going to get to your muscles in 2 hours. It takes about 4 hours to get to that point. So Carmont was in a much better position. He's just not as good as Phil Davis. That's just obvious. So you look at it, Carmont's a great stand-up striker and got cracked, got completely smashed by Phil Davis by him not doing anything at all. Like he made Carmont follow it into him and realize that nothing was really going to happen. And then when Phil went, he went full explosion on him, and then there was no way for Carmont to stop it. He dropped his hand a little bit, gets caught right on the button, and gets put down. And of course, it takes a little bit more to, a couple more strikes to make it sure it's a finish. But still, it's one of those situations where the guy that was in better shape had more time, not better shape, but had more time to recover. Was Carmont, he just isn't as good as Phil Davis. Phil was just a better athlete all the way around.
Yeah, certainly. And obviously not as a premier weight class as well. While you're talking about Phil Davis, let's talk about his first fight against Emmanuel Newton. Now, Newton was talking to a couple of news sources and said that previously he never trained more than 2 weeks leading into a fight, which is something I found very, very interesting. Obviously, he was the face of the company for the division for a really, really long time. Frank, you mentioned that you thought Phil was going to win the whole thing, but did you think that he was going to have such a dominant performance against Newton?
I actually did, and here's the reason why. I love Emmanuel Newton, and when he hears this, he's probably going to be pissed off at me. And we'll talk to me for a little while, but the reality of it is that he's lazy. He really is lazy when he comes to train. He really is lazy when it comes to getting things done. So when he says, hey, I was only in, I've only trained, 2 weeks, he really means that. Like, he's usually out. He'll go to practice. He's not in the gym. I'm not saying that. But he doesn't buckle down for like 2 weeks before the fight. Like, he really doesn't get serious until 2 weeks before the fight. He's always kind of screwing around, and that's the problem. Is that at this level, yeah, you got a great spinning back fist. You knocked out Kimola twice, but the reality of it is that Phil Davis is super smart. He went to Penn State and got into Penn State for a reason because he knows what he's doing. So what he did then is he realized that, hey, all I have to do is like really watch the tape. I know what's going to happen to him. Okay, I'm going to buckle down, keep him from spinning on me, and I'll be okay. You know, and that's what Phil did. Phil's very cerebral, very smart. Like I said earlier, it's hard to hit. So I knew he was going to have a dominant performance. I didn't know it was going to end like that, though. I thought it was going to be, you know, a TKO ground and pound. But yeah, it's Phil looked good, and Emmanuel now knows he's going to have to train a little bit harder.
Well, let me ask you. He said that he only trained for 2 weeks leading into a lot of his fights. Is that true, or is he just sort of making a huge statement there? You said that he's lazy. Was that accurate leading into some of his fights? Did he only train for 2 weeks? Because that seems pretty crazy to us. That's unbelievable.
No, that's about right. No, that's about right. Like, he'll be in the gym once a day. You know, he'll be in the gym every day, you know, 6 days a week, whatever. But he's not like in training camp. Like when someone calls me up and goes, hey, I'm in training camp. Can you come help me? I know, okay, I have to be in shape to go twice a day with this guy because he's going to need my help. There's no way that you're not going twice a day and going twice a day hard. But Emmanuel just goes from a different mindset. He's just like, you know, I'm gonna come in and buckle down, you know, with 2 weeks to go, and that's how it's going to work. But that's not how it's going to work anymore because the guy's getting too good, even in Bellator.
It's crazy that he had that much success for that amount of time and was champion after doing that. I mean, I believe he was speaking to Luke Thomas, and he was saying that prior to that, not necessarily this fight, but he was, you know, smoking weed and having drinks and going to parties and stuff like that. So it's amazing that he's had that much success. Just in terms of the fight itself, I mean, this is a fantastic debut for Phil Davis to go in there and submit a guy like Emmanuel Newton, who is incredibly durable and tough to submit, as we saw in his last fight against Liam McGeary. Phil Davis basically dominated Emmanuel Newton with his Division I wrestling. At no point during the fight did Emmanuel really get off much offense. The other good thing for Phil Davis is he's been a guy that a lot of people have criticized for a while now about his decision wins and his wrestling heavy style. The fact that guys like King Mo and Liam McGeary weren't able to finish Emmanuel Newton, but Phil did within 2 rounds, actually within 1 round. Very, very impressive. Probably one of the best debuts you could ask for from Phil on such a big event. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was absolutely blown away. I actually thought Newton was going to go a little bit longer because, like Frank mentioned, he might have not trained much before, but he said he was going to train hard for this one. So very, very impressed. Now, you know, jumping over to the next fight, guys, Josh Thompson versus Mike Bronzolis. Well, I want to jump over to you first, Frank. Josh Thompson going over to Bellator from the UFC, and the UFC opting really not to offer him much in terms of keeping him there at the organization. Were you surprised at all by that decision?
No, not at all. Like nothing in MMA surprised me anymore. You know, people look at different values, and people are wanting to get voices for a long time. No one would want to speak out against the UFC. No one would want to say anything negative against them because they're going to lose their jobs. Well, now there's another place you can go to, especially if you're a guy like Josh Koscheck or Josh Thompson because you're friends with Scott Coker. So there's another opportunity. Now, some guys, they run their mouths. They're going to trouble. Like Tim Kennedy, he's friends with Coker too. So if he keeps running his mouth about the Reebok deals and stuff like that, he might actually end up having to go do some time over in Bellator because UFC will cut him out. You know, and that's just kind of how it works. But the reality of it is that for a guy like Josh Thompson, there is no way in hell you can go to him and go, no, you're not going to allow me to wear any of my sponsors and allow me to get any external sponsors, then there's no point in me staying with you guys because I make so much money. It's like 50% of my total income from a fight, half of it is from the fight and winning, and the other half of it is from my sponsors. Like he makes just as much as he does from his sponsors as he does from the promotion he's fighting for. So with Josh, from a simple financial standpoint, let's be honest, Josh is not in his prime anymore. He's winding down, and so he's got to make as much money as possible and take as much care of his own personal body and his own future as they possibly can. For him, the better deal is Bellator. It did not surprise me even in the least that he was making the jump over there.
Well, speaking of the fight, Cass, what did you think of the actual performance from Josh? I mean, it was a bit of a gamble. If he loses from the onset, then Josh Thompson isn't as much of a draw for Bellator. What did you think of his performance? Right.
Well, I think one thing that Scott Coker does really well, he's very good at building guys. One of them, Josh Thompson. This was his fight to lose, basically. He dominated the fight with his takedowns and ground control. Every round, he sort of picked up more and more steam, and then he hit that nice arm triangle in the 3rd round. It wasn't like a crazy exciting fight, but it was a dominant fight, and he really needed that win. He had a few bad losses in the UFC, the one most recently to Tony Ferguson, and then a few close ones, one to Benson Henderson, one to Bobby Green. Yeah, look, it was a good win. win in San Jose. The San Jose crowd loves him, so it was a feel-good moment for him. He got back in the win column. You know, it also looked like Mike Bronzales tapped but still went out afterwards. Josh was very classy and won himself some fans when he lifted Mike Bronzales' legs to bring blood back to his head and wake him up. So there wasn't really a way you couldn't feel good about that moment. What did you think? And also, not only is it a good win for Josh, but I fully expect him to be fighting for that Bellator lightweight title soon, if not straight away. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a fantastic performance from him. It took him a little while to really get into it, but by that last round, he was just destroying Mike. It was very, very impressive. I mean, I'm curious how far he can go in the company and how long he'll stick around for. What do you think, Frank? I mean, if he does get a shot at the title, do you think Josh will stick around for a while longer, or do you think he's just got a couple more fights left in him?
Well, it's always, when you're winning, it's easy to stay in something. When you have a belt, it's easier because now you're getting a lot of extra appearances, you're getting a lot of extra things. Like I said earlier, Josh is trying to make money. He's trying to keep increasing his wealth. So if he's the champ, he'll stay around a lot longer. And then, he'll lose one, he'll probably retire, or if he loses 2 in a row, he'll probably get out of the way. But right now, the way the contract stands, I think he has 3 more fights left on his contract. Within that time, he's 100% going to get a lightweight title. Because I don't see very many guys in there that at the division they're going to be able to try to challenge Josh. I mean, they're going to push him, but they're not going to be able to beat him. And that's the question that we're waiting to see. If Josh still has it in the tank, if he can fight 2 or 3 times a year, because it's kind of what he needs to do with Bellator. He needs to probably put on he just fought very well. Now it's September. He probably needs to go back in again, January, February, to kind of keep it, to get back in there again and keep people realizing that he's with Bellator. So, yeah, I see him sticking around if he's the champ and keeps winning. He'll stay around for a long time.
Now, the fight that we spoke about a little bit earlier, Phil Davis versus Francis Carmont, happened right after that. My question to you, Frank, is a lot of people are critical about the fact that Phil Davis, obviously one of the lead guys in the UFC, but not the best, went into Bellator and destroyed everyone, was sort of sending out a mixed message that perhaps some of the competitors in the UFC are light years ahead of the Bellator competitors. When watching Phil Davis just blow through a lot of the Bellator competitors, did you get any kind of thoughts like that? Did you think it might make the company look a little bit bad?
No, I didn't think that. What I did think, though, is that that the UFC didn't have enough faith in Phil Davis. That's kind of what it showed to me, is that, sometimes you have to take, when it's different. See, it's different in boxing. In boxing, your promoter and your manager will watch out for you. They'll protect you a little bit, okay? But especially in the UFC, everyone gets thrown to the wolves. So, Phil was getting dumped to the wolves all the time. So it was very difficult for him to be able to compete at such a high level. And he goes on a losing streak. And then, of course, rightfully so, the UFC lets him go because, he's got a bunch of losses in a row. Well, when you come on to Bellator, it's not the fact that UFC fighters are light years ahead of Bellator fighters. It's the fact that Phil Davis is light years ahead of the Bellator fighters. And really, styles make matchups. And right now, the guys that have the top end of the heap, there's no way they're going to be able to maintain and catch up with Phil, and that's the thing. And of course, we'll see a Liam McGeary fight later. That's a very interesting fight, but it's still going to be a tough fight for Liam, even though he's a champ, because of how things pan out and how the styles match up. Phil Davis is a very awkward style. It's very, very difficult to deal with. And like I said, I don't think I said the fact that the UFC is light years ahead at the weight class over the Bellator fighters, just that Phil Davis is. And some other guy could come out of there, a 3-fight, losing streak in the UFC, and go to Bellator and lose his first 2. Because styles still make matchups, and Phil just stylistically matches up with these guys very, very well.
Do you think, Frank, Dana or anyone from the UFC who's watching Phil's performance at Bellator and sort of, not angry at themselves, but sort of mad that they didn't try and keep him around because of, the big impact that he's going to be making elsewhere in MMA?
No, I think the UFC is also one of those companies where, like, we made a decision, that's it. And you stick with your decision. You don't make any hindsight negative thoughts about it. Like, once you make that decision to release a fighter, that's the end of it. And if the fighter earns his right to come back to the UFC by going to the regional circuit and winning 3 or 4 or 5 fights in a row, then that's how he comes back in. But they'll never go, oh, we let this guy go, and that's going to make somebody else a lot of money. Because it's just not how they think. It's not how they operate. And they stand firm in the decision-making process, and you have to stand, you have to really appreciate that about promoters, that once they make the choice, that's it. The choice is done. The choice has been made, and we're through with it. So I don't think anybody at home is going, oh, crap, I guess we wish you could have kept Phil. What they are doing is going, see, our cast-off is beating everybody up. That's what they're saying. Like, the guy that we didn't even want, that wasn't good enough to be with us, is not beating up all your guys. So look how good we are. That's what they're doing.
There's a lot of bragging claims there. Now, Cass, about the fight itself, we spoke about it briefly at the start, but what did you think about it? And also, do you think Bellator got lucky in many ways by not having King Mo fight Phil Davis?
Well, now, you know what? The good thing about that is that's a fight that they can make in the future. I really wanted to see King Mo versus Phil Davis. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I think it worked out for actually perfectly because Phil Davis got a really impressive stoppage. That's 2 in one night. I mean, like I said, there was a lot of criticism over Phil Davis' style, and he just blew through 2 guys, both in the first round. Davis hasn't stopped anyone via strikes in over 6 years. His last TKO win was in 2009. I mean, I know Francis Carmont, he was originally a middleweight in the UFC, so it's another ex-UFC guy that he beat, but hey, nevertheless, an impressive stoppage win is an impressive stoppage win. Once again, for a guy who was criticized for his lack of finishing ability, it was a great night for Phil, and he'll be a very worthy contender to Liam McGeary's light heavyweight title. That's going to be the real test for Liam McGeary, and like I said, now we get to see King Mo Phil Davis in the future, save it for another big Bellator tentpole card, so I think it couldn't have worked out better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I agree with that. I think King Mo is definitely someone you can keep as a fight for Phil Davis if he does become champion. You can sell that fight. And King Mo is great on the mic, so that's something they can look forward to. Now, jumping over to Tito Ortiz versus Liam McGeary, Frank, I want to get your opinion. A lot of people are wondering if Tito made the right decision by choosing to go with Liam rather than going for one of those sort of marquee matchups like Tito versus Kimbo or Tito versus Frank Shamrock or something like that. What did you think about his decision to actually go for the title and fight a guy who's really tough in Liam McGeary?
Marquee matchups are great, but marquee matchups don't get you notoriety and fame. Like, you forget about the marquee matchup once the marquee matchup is over. You kind of say, oh, yeah, that's right, those guys fought a while ago. Okay, yeah, all right, that's cool. But you always remember the champ. So Tito's game plan is, hey, if I can become the champ, if I can win again, if I can be the guy with the belt, and everyone's going to start bowing down to me again, I can tell everybody, look, I still have it. I still got it going on at 40 years old. But it was just such a hard task for him. And I knew that the fight was going to go, not necessarily that way, but I knew that Liam was going to win, even though, I call both guys friends, and I know both guys very well. It's still just like Liam, I knew is going to be the better fighter no matter what Tito did, just because of age. It's just how it is. Like, the window starts to close and slow down. And for Tito, the best decision for him and how he thinks and how his process is that for him to be the champ is much better than anybody else. So he really had that thought process of like, hey, I want to be able to win. I want to be able to have that belt. And so for him to go with the marquee matchup would have been a very poor decision, even though that going for this one, he definitely was going to lose. So.
Well, I mean, the fight was Tito showed off some impressive skills in the fight. He had some great control, and at certain points, it almost looked like he may walk away the champion from this one. Cass, what was your analysis on the fight? What did you think of Tito's performance up until the point he got locked in that inverted arm triangle?
I mean, he was doing everything right. He had the fight on the ground. He was doing well on top. He was controlling Liam. He was landing some shots. He had Liam's arm pinned behind his back in that seatbelt position. Tito looked good. He was doing all the right things. And I feel bad for him because he'd only just escaped McGeary's armbar attempt a few seconds earlier, and he probably thought that he was in the clear. But that's what you get with Liam McGeary. He chains his submissions together, much like we saw against Emmanuel Newton, and that's what he did. He got the arm triangle. I just think Tito was caught off guard. He didn't expect it. Look, the better man won. Tito didn't give any excuses. He was very humble afterwards. I felt bad for Liam, though, when Tito got on the mic and gave a really long speech. Kind of stole his moment a little bit. I legitimately thought that Tito was going to retire. So I was thinking, okay, take as much time as you need if this is a wrap on, such a legendary career. But, looks like Tito's going to return for his final fight in his contract because he didn't retire. But look, I don't think Tito looked bad at all. And I think that's a really big win for Liam McGeary.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the awkwardness that was the big post-fight speech, just want to get your thoughts, Frank. What did you think of Tito's performance? And also, how you said you're friends with him. How good is Liam McGeary? I mean, let's take him out of Bellator for a second and say worldwide. How does he stand up against the best of the best in the UFC, in your opinion?
Well, first, Tito looked really good. He did very well. He trained, tremendously hard. He's got everything in his personal life and his private life all dialed in straight away. So now he's got everything squared up between himself and everything else. So now his training camps can go amazingly well. So he did great. He looked good. He did amazingly well. He had full control. And like I thought at the first takedown, I was like, okay, that's the end of this round. I have to wait for Liam to get going in round 2 because I thought for sure he isn't going to hold him down. Now taking Liam out of Bellator at 11-0, is he ready? Is anybody ready to battle against anybody at 205? In the UFC, when you're 10-0, the top level guys. Yes, I know Chris Weidman when he jumped in, the UFC was only like 7-0 or 8-0 or whatever, and then and telling him he's the champ. Like, I get it, but it's not everyone's like that. Liam is legit. He is 100% one of those guys that everyone doesn't like hanging out with. Everyone's kind of falling apart. You know, when they train with him in New York at Hensel Glacier Academy, he's just one of those guys. But he absolutely is not ready yet for the top 10. I personally have him in the top 20, but getting there. And the way that he dominated Tito, should I jump him up, you know, top 10 at a 205-pound weight class overall? But not yet, because what I want to see is him with a guy like Phil Davis. I want to see with a guy that's long, lanky, awkward, and an incredible wrestler. Can Liam deal with it? We saw how Tito, he's not an incredible wrestler. He's got great wrestling for MMA. Tito was able to take him down relatively easily. Just slid by, did a couple of tricks to him. Liam fell for it and up on his back. But then, of course, Liam's still just as dangerous on his back as he is on his feet, as we saw with the submission. But really, I'm not going to jump Liam up too high because I want to see what happens with him and Phil Davis.
No, that's a great point. And look, Kacper mentioned some of the weirdness that was happening in the post-fight press conference. Tito taking the mic away and just sort of talking about what was going on. A lot of people thought he was going to retire, but he didn't. Did you think it was too much Tito on the mic? Did you think he needed Liam to have his moment?
Yeah, Tito's the egotistical maniac, you know, and that's the reason why he tries so hard to be a champ, because it feeds his ego. And that's the reality of all former huge champions, that he really is, you know, all of us are egotistical, and that's just how it works. So he really wanted to, but that's Tito's way of going, look, Liam, I have no excuses, no broken spine, no cracked skull, no hurt foot, no blown knee. I was the best Tito Ortiz you could possibly face right now, and you beat me, period. And that's just kind of his way of really giving the champ a lot of props. I did think it was a little bit long, and I agree with you guys. When we started, I was like 100% he's going to retire. Like, I was like, oh, he's retiring. You know, and so, but then, so I was like, okay, like you guys, like, go ahead, take as much time as you want. You know, take your time because you're gonna step out. But he didn't. You know, it was just one of those deals where he needed to finish up what he was doing and was trying to you know, make it work as best he could. And he you know, went a little bit too long. But you know, Liam took it in stride, and then you know, went ahead and went on with it. And Liam's a humble guy himself, so it was very easy for him to go, look, he's a legend. Let's go ahead and let him talk a little bit, and I'll take it here in a second.
Well, Cass, Frank says Liam's a humble guy, and you can see that in the way he talks, the way he carries himself. What did you think about the awkwardness that ensued when they brought Phil Davis into the ring to square off with Liam McGarry? Because I felt like they sort of lost the moment that they were going for. It just didn't quite work for me. What did you think?
Well, I think Phil Davis... No. Oh, sorry, you go, Frank.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about that. But I was like, my thing was like, I was just trying to make a quick comment where I was like, yeah, it was Phil Davis is not a good trash talker. So you went in there and he's like, you got to work harder to keep that belt. You're like, well, my coach tells me that. That was just dumb. Like, it literally was one of those, we were watching a game show and it was like, is it B, Alex? And wah, wah, wah. It's great off. So.
Yeah, look, I think with Liam McGarry, like, he's not big on trash talking either, though. So I think even though Tito went for a long time, like, had it been, I know it's Liam's moment. He just, you know, he defended the title. I don't think he would have really filled up much time anyway. I think with Phil Davis, look, I think Phil Davis had the right attitude. At least he was going there and trying to sort of start the rivalry. He had that funny promo afterwards when he spoke to Jimmy Smith and joked about how the athletic commission is going to pop him because his prayer counts were off the chain. I mean, Liam again is one of those guys where he's not going to trash talk. So I don't think it really mattered what Phil Davis was going to say. Liam wouldn't have. Correct me if I'm wrong, because you know him better than we do. But I don't feel like Liam was going to talk trash. Like, even with Tito in the lead up, it looked like Tito was trying to push for that rivalry. He was saying things like, you know, I'm gonna beat the Brit, even though Liam McGarry trains from in New York, and I feel like Liam was very respectful the whole way through. Is there a side to the Liam, Frank, where there is a trash talking side, or is he just a nice guy through and through?
No, he'll trash talk with his mates. He'll trash talk with his friends in the gym. He's not gonna trash talk him publicly. He's just not his style. Like, so he'll trash talk me all the time.
Yeah,
we'll talk about going out drinking and falling down. Who trips over first? Like, we do it all the time. But he's not a guy that's going to trash talk. He will not do it publicly. He's not going to get on there and cut a promo about like, oh, I'm gonna beat Tito's big head in. You know, I'm gonna beat his head in so bad it's going to shrink into normal size. Like, he's just not that kind of guy. He's more respectful. He's more humble, which is the reason why he does so good at what he does, because he's not worrying about trying to think of the next line. He's out there thinking about the next way to hit somebody, the next way to submit somebody. So that's what you get with Liam, is that he's just going to be that kind of good-looking champion that's kind of good-looking, but you're not really sure why he's good-looking, and he smiles, he's making a tooth, doesn't really make any sense, and he's just going to kind of like, oh, all shucks, man. You know, he's kind of like he's almost like an English hillbilly a little bit. He just kind of got that Forrest Griffin, all shucks, man, this is just kind of how I do things, and he thinks everybody's but doing it, you know?
I'll tell you what, it's probably those nipple tattoos that push him over the line in that regard. Now, the other thing that happened in Bellator, guys, I mean, this is the big one. They teased an announcement. We all sort of had a feeling it had something to do with Fedor. Frank, he probably knew a lot more than we did. But then when we saw the big man that was behind Pride come out and announce that Fedor will be fighting for this new startup company in Japan, this new promotion, which will be in Tokyo on New Year's Eve, I mean, a lot of the MMA world was pretty disappointed. A lot of them wanted to see Fedor in the UFC. Now, before we talk about our reactions, I want to find out from you, Frank. You mentioned at the start of the show when we were talking to you, how much about this did you know before it was announced?
Well, I knew that Vagab was coming back. I knew his first promotion date was going to be, New Year's Eve time, because that's the biggest way in Japan to come back out with a promotion to do it over New Year's. Like, that's a huge holiday over there. And so I knew that was going to come. Now, did I think that Fedor was going to be a part of it? Not until I knew that Fedor was there. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay. So what's happened now is a full fold. You see Scott Coker go, we're not in the Fedor Emelianenko business anymore. What he does in the future with other organizations, and eventually he'll probably come to us, if things are right fit for later. And then everyone's like, oh, he's going to sign with the UFC. He's going to sign with the UFC. I was like, well, that's weird, because the UFC, they're not going to say he's going to sign with the UFC, and then until it's already like he's in like deep negotiation, and a week later it'll just pop out that he's already signed. And nothing ever came out after that other than the rumors where he might sign. And then somebody, from a good source, he's going to sign with the UFC. If I heard it from another source, he's going to sign with the UFC. I was like, but no one would name their sources, and none of the sources that I had were saying that same thing. Then I saw him at Bellator. I was like, oh, he's going to sign. He's going to sign with Bellator, but it's going to be like this shell game. He's not really signing with Bellator. He's going to sign with Saki Ibarra, and Scott Coker are going to work out this deal for him, because Fedor's expensive. He wants $2 million take home every time he fights. So if he fights in America,
wow,
50% of that goes to taxes, and I'm still going to $2 million. So if he wants $2 million or 1.9 or 1.8 or whatever it is take home, then there's no way that Bellator can afford it. It's impossible. Viacom can't put the kind of money up on one guy over, and he wants that for 3 fights. So every single fight for 3 fights, they got to come up with like $3.5 million or something to pay the taxes, so he can go home with 1.9 or $2 million in his pocket. So, but you go similar to Japan, it's a different kind of tax bracket, different kind of rules. The pay structure is a little bit different. They can do that over there, and I have a feeling that Spike is going to kind of that Bellator has their hand in this, as far as how is he getting paid, how am I going to use him. So say it sounds like a fight deal with these guys in Japan. They'll fight 3 over there and then 2 for Bellator, or some series like that. Like, that's what I think is. I don't know that for sure. I have no proof of that, but that's kind of my feeling of what's going to happen, is that he's going to have this kind of deal where Sagabar's organization is going to do like 2 or 3 fights a year and then have to move on. So it's just one of those things, and it really is when you're dealing with a guy like Fedor. He's past his prime. He retired from the sport because he went on the 3-fight losing streak. That was 2 years ago. There's no way he's going to be able to maintain and come back and not have ring rust and not have these problems that every other older athlete has when they come back through. Training camps are hard. When you've been done one in a long time, and then you're 38 years old on top of that, like, it's hard to go back into 2 hours a day, twice a day. 4 hours a day of training is a difficult task, and to try to do it at an older age is impossible. So I think they're going to give him a couple of feeder fights, good name fights, things that sell tickets in Saitama Super Arena over in Tokyo. I think like names like they're really going to bring him along and make it a big deal about it. But I also think there's going to be guys that everyone can see that Fedor's going to be able to win to get some of the ring rust locked up.
Well, I mean, you mentioned feelings, Frank. I want to get your feelings on the subject, Cass. What did you think when you heard the announcement? What were your feelings about it?
Yeah, I'm dumb. I'm disappointed, man. I really wanted to see Fedor go to the UFC. I feel like he was already so dominant in Japan for so many years that I really wanted to see how he'd do in his second run in America against the best fighters in the world. We've seen Fedor do things in Japan. I feel like he's got nothing else to prove other than going to the UFC and seeing if he can win the title. And I mean, that's a real sort of pipe dream, but I still wanted to see if it was a possibility. Fighting in Japan is not going to be the same because most of the best heavyweights in the world are already in the UFC. I'm curious how the new Japanese promotion will do this time around. One of the things that made Pride so awesome and gave it legitimacy, other than the theatrics and the contrast to the UFC, was that it also had some of the best fighters in the world, with the UFC having most of those guys and the rest being scattered across Bellator and World Series. How will Pride 2.0 put on big events, and who will they use to fill the cards? And the other thing is, in MMA in Japan has been on a decline for a long time, and Japanese just aren't that into it. I believe that nobody may know the Japanese market and the keys to success better than a local, but it remains to see how they can bounce back and how much the Yakuza scandals hurt in Pride. So, look, the positive that I can take from it, hopefully Fedor goes in, gets a few, decent fights, gets some decent wins, and then hopefully comes over to the UFC.
Yeah, well, I mean, Frank, it's interesting because what's reported is it's either a 1-fight or a 2-fight deal that Fedor has signed. Do you see there any opportunity, any possibility that after Fedor comes back, if he has a good run, he might still consider going over to the UFC? Or do you think that's done and dusted? We'll never see the man in the company ever?
I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to end up going to Bellator, I think, because Scott had so much, help in making this thing happen. With Sakabara coming back up and getting this program started, and so much more happening with Fedor going and signing with Sakabara for the 1 or 2 fights. I see him definitely jumping over to Bellator right after that, because also too, let's not forget, they do need the shot in the arm. They do need the shot in the arm in the heavyweight division to get themselves like a little more legitimacy. And at Fedor's age, how much can he really do? Now, if they give him a tough fight, a second fight, and he wins kind of decisively, he might change his mind and decide to switch over to the UFC. But I don't see the UFC trying to pay the money either. If you see the UFC giving him $1.9 million for a heavyweight fighter that basically is going to put out the pasture, they've already got all the footage on him. They already own all the footage from the old Pride days. So they're not going to get any more footage, or it's going to increase the library at all from the UFC standpoint. And how many more ticket sales is he going to sell for already sold out arenas when you got guys like Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey already selling out? Conor beats Jose Aldo. Dana's already said he's going to give him the 80,000 seat arena in I think in Ireland, the Scocker Stadium, to sell out as well, and Conor's going to be able to do it. So how is Fedor going to do that? Is Fedor going to sell out, huge stadiums in Russia, and then also the UFC's in Russia? I mean, that's the only real benefit to having, in my line, to having a Fedor fight for the UFC is if he's able to sell a ton more tickets, because at an asking price, take home of $1.9 million, you have to be able to at least double that in ticket sales and T-shirt sales and pay-per-view buys. If you can't, then what's the point of paying it? If the company's not going to lose money on them, with Bellator, they will actually get that back in return, because they'll bring a lot more viewers to Spike TV here in the States being wanting to watch Bellator.
Well, let me ask you this, Frank, because, I mean, it's a big price tag, and people were interested in seeing Fedor fight legitimate competition. They wanted to see him fight Verdum again. They wanted to see how he'd do against the guys in the UFC. Do you think people will care about him fighting in Japan, and do you think it'll bring in the ratings that, this new startup promotion hopes to get?
It will bring in the ratings, because it'll be New Year's in Japan, which would be like the 30th in America. So people on Spike TV will sit around and watch it easily, like, the morning of the 30th. So it'll be easy to get up and watch this thing. You're out on vacation from Christmas. So it's very similar to go ahead and watch it, and they'll have a home crowd. People that are just home on vacation will be able to turn on the TV and be able to see Fedor fight. So, of course, they're going to go ahead and step in and watch this. I think he will get a bit of a draw, but really it's not the distribution of television that's the big fighting factor. It's how much can he sell tickets? Can they get the arena? Because everyone, most of us know that September Super Arena, it's sizable. It changes size. They have different configurations. He can go from like 12,000 seat arena up to whatever 72,000 seat arena. Will he get it up to a 72,000 seat arena? Will he be able to blow it all the way up so it's that big? That's the question that everyone's kind of asking right now, and that's what they're hoping on, is sell that many tickets and that many drinks and that much food, the night of the event in Japan on December 31st.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Now, Frank, we know you don't have much time, so we want to quickly weigh in on this with you, and then we'll let you go. Recently, people were outraged. The Nevada State Athletic Commission gave Nick Diaz a 5-year suspension and a sizable fine. We may never see Nick Diaz fight again because he's not the youngest fighter as he is now. What did you think of this whole situation? Do you think it was warranted, or do you agree with fans and think it's ridiculous?
Well, I think it's ridiculous from this standpoint. It is his third fail. I actually commentated the fight when he fought Gomi, and that was his first fail for Pride. Mm-hmm. And I totally understand that, look, it's your third offense. But what I'm confused by is that the Nevada State Athletic Commission came up with a system of there's going to be certain tiers. Every drug that's illegal has a certain tier, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then each one within those tiers has a first offense, second offense, third offense. Like what happens when you get caught for the third time? Well, my understanding was that the policy they approved was a 36-month suspension and 75% of your, up to 75% of your purse for a third offense of marijuana. Well, 36 months is 3 years. It's not 5 years. So where did they come up with this extra 2 years? Why do they punish him even more for? It's like if you go to prison for an offense and the traffic ticket, not prison, but the traffic ticket is up to a $400, $50 fine and 2 points on your license. The judge can't go, I'm going to give you 4 points. I'm going to charge you $800, but they can't do all that. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't understand how it works out at all. So I'm only confused by, I understand the reasoning. I understand the dollar amount of the fine because it's about 75% of his purse, which is the way it should be. What I don't understand is is the reasons why they made it 5 years instead of 3 years.
Yeah, no. Go, Cass.
Sorry, just to get with those tiers that you were talking about, Frank. Though those don't come into effect until after July, and because the test failure was, I believe, February or January, those technically don't count yet. Anyone that fails for marijuana, etc., those sort of come into effect, but these don't.
No, I understand that. I understand that they it didn't come into effect until July. Those actually didn't come into effect until September 1st, and he failed back in February. So I understand that reasoning. But you don't elect something in and go, oh, well, because we didn't get a chance to get to him yet, because this thing was appealed twice and got moved twice, and they shifted things around twice. Like, it's like, okay, well, then we're going to go ahead and give him 2 more years. It makes no sense. It just doesn't make sense from a commission standpoint. Like, I don't understand it. And if you're watching these commission hearings, the other thing that's kind of strange to me is now everyone is getting dulled, everyone is getting made up, everyone is getting put together to watch these things happen. Like, everyone now, if you look at the commission table, the commissioners, they're all in full makeup and iron press shirts, and before when you go to these things, the guys look like they just rolled out of bed. So now even the commissioners are getting in the fact, hey, we're on TV, we're making big noise. So like, I'm wondering, remember, I'm a big conspiracy theorist, I'm wondering, hey, did they do this because they wanted to make a point on Nick Diaz because he kept pleading the fifth, or they do this because now everyone's watching them and they want to prove that the Nevada State Athletic Commission is the toughest commission around?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, it's almost become like a sitcom drama where people tune in just to see the ridiculousness. One last question to you, Frank, because we know you do a lot of MMA refereeing. This happened a while ago, but it was another thing that brought up some questions about the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Steve Mazzagati's performance for the main event World Series of Fighting against with Jake Shields and Husimar Palhares. It seemed like Steve didn't really get any punishment for a terrible refereeing job. Your thoughts? Do you think referees need to be held more accountable if they do a job like Steve did at World Series of Fighting in that fight?
If you go to MMA Oddsbreaker and go back to the toe-to-toe section and scroll down, you'll see where Big John McCarthy and I are actually talking about this particular thing, where the referees are accountable. Now, mind you, Big John McCarthy is my mentor in refereeing. Whenever I have a problem or a question, I go right to John, and whenever there's a problem that I did, like some guy screwed up on, the promoter or the commissioner will call John and tell him to call me. And then I get the riot act by John McCarthy. And let me tell you something. John was yelling at you for something you did wrong. You learn your lesson. You never fucking do it again. Like, that's exactly what happens. With Steve Mazzagati, it kind of seems like that he keeps getting away with crap. And it's really bad. I like Steve as a person. I think he's a horrible ref. I love him as a fireman. I don't think he should be a ref anymore. I think it's bad. He's going to get somebody hurt. He's going to get somebody in trouble. And he's not taking control. The ref has to take control at certain times. When a guy is poking somebody else in the eye, he needs to stop and be like, hey, look, you got poked in the eye. I saw I got poked in the eye. He's clawing at your face. Can you see? Jake, can you see? Oh, okay, Jake, I'm sorry. You said it one time you can't see. Fights over. Jake wins because you legally poked him in the eye. Like, he needed to take control. He didn't do that. And Mazzagati seems to get away with that stuff kind of all the time. Same thing happened with Josh Berkman and Fitch when they were fighting. He wasn't paying attention to how that was going on. And Fitch went completely out. It was out for a long time, and everyone else could see it from cage side. That's where I was sitting, but he didn't get in there to stop the fight. So it's very difficult, for Mazzagati right now. He needs to go back in and take some more courses or take some more lessons or learn a little bit more of how to ref, because he's lost his mojo. He's lost his ability to get in and step in. He's human. Things happen. He needs a little bit of time to try to revamp and relook at things a little bit differently and take another course and then get back in there again and get some more reps.
Yeah, he's like Austin Powers, lost the mojo. So we'll see what happens with that. A lot of fans have been harping on it. Frank, we can't tell you how much we appreciate your time in breaking down Bellator with us and obviously weighing in on Fedor, Nick Diaz, and now Steve Mazzagati. Don't forget to go to MMAoddsbreaker.com. There are a ton of interviews, an absolute goldmine there with Frank Trigg and a long, long list of fighters. And, of course, follow Frank Trigg on Twitter at Frank Trigg. Frank, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
And there you guys go. Frank Trigg, UFC Hall of Famer, joins Submission Radio to break down Bellator Dynamite. I mean, it's a real pleasure to have Frank on the show. He's been on the show many a time as a guest, but now as an analyst and a breakdown man, he's just as good as his fighting. He's amazing on the stick, and it was great having him on Submission Radio, Cass.
Would you say, Dennis, that he's almost become a Submission Radio alumni?
Well, at this point, he's almost like a third Submission Radio host.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you get 2 pinky rings with that, or
yeah,
I don't know, maybe you get like a Submission Radio tie. We're going to have to talk to the legal team and figure out the best way to approach it. But yeah, he's a great part of the whole thing. Now, Cass, obviously he's a man that didn't have much time to be on the show, so he had to go. So I just want to quickly break down my thoughts on Fedor. I don't really have much to say. I just wanted to add that I can see why this idea of Fedor going to Japan was good for him. Obviously, Frank spoke about the money that he's going to make. And as a fighter, you know, at the end of the day, like we've spoken about before, you want to make as much money as you can before you get out of the sport. So when it comes to his personal choice, I completely understand it's going to be easier fights and he's going to have less pressure on him and he's going to make more money than if he joined the UFC, which is, you know, huge. But just from a fan's perspective, I'm just super bummed because I really wanted to see him join the UFC. I really wanted to see him fight some credible opponents. I know that his latest run, he had a mix of opponents. His last few fights didn't really say much because he wasn't fighting guys at the top of the caliber. And even at Strikeforce, he fought some tough dudes, but no one really in their prime. I mean, he fought Verdum. Verdum beat him, and he fought Henderson, and he fought Bigfoot Silva. But I just really wanted to have a chance, have a shot of seeing him fight some credible opponents. And it's pretty devastating that it looks like he won't be joining UFC. I mean, I think Frank was spot on. I think after he's done with these 2 fights or 1 fight in Japan, I'm pretty sure he's going to go over to Bellator. I think Scott Coker gave that away when he said he'll have Fedor back down the track. But yeah, I'm just super disappointed from a fan's perspective because I really do think he could have gave a lot to the UFC. I think he could have done a lot for the fans by joining the UFC, but at the same time, it could be the best thing that he ever did for himself because who knows, if he went into the UFC and he got destroyed by 3 guys, it could hurt his legacy, could hurt his health. So personally, he made the right choice, but just from a fan's perspective, you know, there's no doubt about it. And I'm really, really upset about the whole thing.
I can feel your upsetness radiating through the mic. Look, yeah, I think he covered it well. He did what he had to do for himself, and look, whatever. I mean, considering he's old, I guess in a sense we're almost lucky that he's even coming back and fighting. Who would have even thought that he would have unretired? But I think the biggest thing is outside of the UFC and even Bellator, like, who's he going to fight? What are his options?
I don't know, because Bellator's going to lend some of their fighters to the card,
right?
So maybe they're going to give some of their heavyweights over. Maybe like a Czech Congo or something. I'm not even sure. Or maybe they'll just get some Japanese, I don't know, old school Japanese fight. I don't know.
Well, people say Czech Congo. Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the most legit fights they can make. But then you got guys like, say, Volkov, you've got Ivanov, you've got Minikov, people throwing around Sergei Karatanov's name. The thing is,
a lot of ovs.
Yeah, a lot of ovs, right? A lot of, like, clearly Russian Ukrainians. But the thing is, I don't think the Russian Ukrainians really like to fight each other. I think like Ivanov and Minikov, I don't think they want to fight Fedor, and I don't know how keen Fedor would be on facing them.
And who's really going to, I mean, they're great fighters, but who's really going to care about that fight outside the hardcore fan base? You know what I mean? You need someone that people care about. And again, I don't want to sound too passionate about it, but you got to find an opponent that people want to see him fight. I mean, you're spot on. It's difficult to do.
You could possibly do Tito Ortiz, but I don't think Bellator's really going to give such a big draw away, especially because he's got one last fight on the contract.
Maybe Kimbo Slice.
Yeah, but again, he's a big draw, and how many fights does he have left in him? Bellator want them for himself. And I don't know, Kimbo versus Fedor, like, you know, everybody loves a good freak show fight every now and then, but man, that's pretty freaky even for my tastes.
Maybe Ken Shamrock, Frank Shamrock, I don't know, man. It's terrible matchups. I wouldn't want to see any one of them.
You could do Randy Couture, but I do feel like that's got Bellator written all over it. That's something they would do in Bellator, not necessarily Japan. I mean, you could do Pudzianowski, Mariusz Pudzianowski. Imagine if Fedor lost to Mariusz. That would be horrible.
I mean, it would be one of those sort of pride-ish things if they did give it to him because he's such a big guy. It would sort of remind you of back in the day when he fought all these giants in Pride.
You could give him like a Bobby Lashley or a James Thompson, but then those guys are scheduled to face each other. So I really do think the options are slim, and I have a lot of doubts of how well this company, this Pride 2.0 will do. I know a lot of people are clamoring for it, and they're like, you know, Pride rules and this and that. Hey, man, Pride was great, but they were only great because they had a lot of legitimate good fighters. They had a lot of top fighters. The UFC absorbed them all. And now there's very few fighters outside the UFC Bellator and World Series that people consider elite. I mean, you could make the argument Ben Askren. But even after his last fight, I think he lost a lot of steam. I don't see how they're going to make a complete company out of what's laying around in terms of the MMA landscape, much less the heavyweights.
No, that makes sense. I'm not sure what they're going to. I wonder why they're bringing it back, because obviously, you know, they're passionate about MMA, but do they know something we don't? Do they have some kind of game plan that we don't know about? Because from where it's looking, it's pretty grim over there in Japan. I know they're going to have, you know, this big UFC card over there with Barnett versus Nelson.
That's in a week.
Yeah, less than but people over there apparently aren't really clamoring for it, and it's got some great names on there. Roy Nelson, possibly a character that they'd love over in Japan if he did eventually move from the UFC to this Japanese promotion, because he's got one of these crazy looks to him. But I don't know what they're going to do, Cass. I don't know if they're going to start signing just like these crazy knockout boxers, or if they're going to have these super heavyweights, like if they're going to have, I don't know, like sumo wrestlers or something like that again. I don't know if they're just going to start putting up like midgets against like, just ridiculously big people. I don't know what their game plan will be, but it'll have to be something substantial for them to survive.
Well, they may do it like old school Dynamites and feature kickboxing as well to really fill out the card. Who knows? Maybe Glory will be involved. It's this big family of like Spike TV and Bellator, and it's like Kiraba, and I think the word on the street is they may call it Samurai. I'm not too sure. Imagine if they called it Pride 2.0. That would be hilarious.
Pride 2.0. That'd be good. I mean, Bob Sapp, I don't think he'll come back to the ring, but surely they'll involve him. There'll be some kind of weird dancing. Yeah. He'll be arm wrestling people, or giving bear hugs, or like, I don't know, doing something. Smacking fans around. I love that over there, man. There'll be naked Japanese chicks jumping on all over his taxi again, like when he was on the show and told us about that story. That naked lady that just jumped on his on the windshield of his cab. Bob Sapp. Yeah, I wish that happened to us. I know. Here in Melbourne. No, we don't even have anything to ride in. But I was going to say... Can't even afford a cab. Yeah, we can't afford a cab. We've got to Uber it. But I was going to say, what about Mayhem Miller? Maybe if he pulls all his stuff together. He loves a bit of a cheeky dance down to the ring. I mean, maybe he'd be good for him. I don't know. This could be just what he needs. Can Nick Diaz... Here's a little thing that goes from one topic to another that we're going to talk about. But can Nick Diaz fight in Japan because it's not commissioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission? Well, the problem is he's still under contract with the UFC, and there is no way the UFC would release him from his contract. No way. I think the UFC are pretty confident that, well, actually, I've got nothing to back that up, but I think the UFC are probably hoping that something will turn around, something will be changed, and the UFC can't really do anything against, that would piss the commission off. Obviously, they've got that whole thing where, like, you can't take Nick Diaz to Texas and be like, well, he can fight here because it's not Nevada. I doubt the UFC is going to release Nick Diaz from his contract, first of all, or even go to Japan and try and promote the fight, because then Nevada would get pissed off. But look, let's talk about this Nick Diaz thing, right? I want to cover this, because even though it happened, like a week ago, we haven't had the chance, we haven't had a show since then. I'm just going to dive straight into it, man. A lot of people are saying Nick broke the rules. He should be punished. It's his third offense. Here's my stance, right? Yep. By all means, guys, if you're listening, which you obviously are, but depending on whether you're listening on YouTube or whatever, definitely sound off in the comments below. Drop your comments below. Let us know what you think. And if you're not on YouTube, if you're listening on like Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, or SoundCloud, drop us a line at Twitter at SubmissionAUS. We want to hear your thoughts. But according to the test result, 2 out of 3 tests came back negative. Only 1 came back positive. So it was not proven that he broke the rules, right? During Anderson Silva's hearing, it was Pat Lundvall who claimed that if Smurtle, which is a drug testing lab, were a fishing net, that it had a tighter weave than Quest, which is another drug testing lab, and was able to catch more things. It was in fact the Smurtle, the tighter weave tests that came, and it's a ridiculous name, by the way. Smurtle. It's a Pokemon. Something that a Pokemon... Right. Yeah. You're right. So it was the Smurtle test, the ones that are supposed to catch more things, that came up negative, and the Quest test that came up positive. The other thing is that the 2 tests that came back negative from Smurtle, they were WADA-approved labs. The positive test came back from a lab that was not WADA-approved. So I don't think you can really pick and choose and say, well, WADA's a factor this time, but WADA can't always be a factor, which I believe was one of their defenses. So these were not blood tests, they were urine tests, which only makes the results even more blurry. In my opinion, Nick Diaz's lawyers did a fantastic job of presenting the facts, and yet the commission completely ignored them at all and basically said, yeah, you provided excellent facts, but we're going to ignore them and suspend Nick Diaz anyway because, well, we don't like his attitude. You can't do that to someone based on their attitude. You have to look at the facts. You're either guilty or you're not guilty. To me, I've watched a few of these shit shows on Fight Pass where the lawyer comes in and they defend, whether it's, Vitor, Chael, Anderson, whatever. This is the first time that I recall where a fighter's lawyer has actually been prepared and done a good job. And it seems as though all that did was piss off the commission enough to hand out such a ridiculous punishment. I mean,
I'll stop. I'll take a break for now because I've got a lot more points, Dennis. What are your thoughts in this Nick Diaz thing? I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I mean, you made your points. I agree with your points completely. I mean, it looked really, really personal, and it isn't fair for fighters because you could go in there and you got these people who are giving you all these suspensions and giving you all these punishments because they don't like you or because, all right, you broke the rules before, but they give you more of a punishment because they don't like you personally or because they don't like the way that you carry yourself. And, that just doesn't make any sense to me. At the end of the day, yes, he broke the law. He had the weed, but it was undetermined, like you mentioned. 2 tests came back clean. He was one of the only guys that came in there and wasn't creating like these ridiculous excuses like I was away having like sex medicine or like doing something weird. Thai sex pills or doing something weird. He came in there with, like you mentioned, a good, solid case, and they just wouldn't even listen to it. I think that's completely unprofessional. And the other thing I think is giving a guy Nick Diaz's age a 5-year suspension is pretty much like just taking him out of the game completely. I just think it's absolutely brutal, and I think that if he did something wrong, you got to give him a punishment. I understand that, but giving him 5 years, I think, is excessive. I know it's his 3rd time that he broke the rules because a lot of people mentioned that to us on Facebook. A lot of people spoke to us about their thoughts about it, but it just doesn't seem right for me. And I'm mirroring Ronda Rousey's words where Anderson Silva tests positive for steroids. All right, it's his first serious thing that he's gone through. He tests positive and he's going to be back early next year, but Nick Diaz tests positive for weed. One of the 3 tests positive for weed, and he may never fight again. I just think it's ridiculous. And now he's in this position where he's under contract with the UFC. He can't even choose to fight anywhere else. They basically take the option of him fighting again out of his hands. And yeah, it just seems completely unfair to me. But Cass, continue on with these points because you've had some great points already.
Well, 2 things that I want to sort of tackle. You mentioned he broke the law and he broke the rules. No, he didn't. First of all, he didn't break the law. Weed is not illegal. If you look at America in general and most of the world, marijuana is being considered less and less of a drug every month, every year. It's almost up there with drinking. Not quite yet, but the stigma of marijuana is just not what it used to be. Steroids are illegal. Regardless of whether you're doing PED testing, regardless of whether you're a competitor, they are illegal. You can't buy steroids over the counter and say, steroids, please. They're illegal. Marijuana's not. It's not even a banned substance. Nick has a TUE, he's got an exemption, he has a card, and it's prescribed to him by his doctor. And the biggest issue as far as testing goes is exactly how much of it you can have in your system. And that's where things get blurry. 2 tests come back saying he was completely fine. 1 test comes back and says he wasn't fine at all. I mean, that's 2 out of 3. How do you just look at that and say, well, we're going to pick the negative one because... I don't know. See, I can't fathom a response there. Why do you pick the negative one? 2 out of 3 came back negative. You can have weed in your system. You just can't be above the limit. And it wasn't made clear how much weed Nick had in his system due to inconsistent test results. You mentioned about things that the commission being unfair. What's the point of having a hearing if the commission has already decided the fate of the fighter, even if they haven't decided the amount of time he or she will be suspended for? It's like you're going in there, the commission have already made up their mind. Why bring a lawyer? Why go through the whole rigmarole of putting together a case, etc., just for the commission to say, well, whatever. I mean, those are great facts, and we're very entertained, but we're going to give you a punishment anyway. I'm not going to debate so much whether weed is a performance enhancer or not, because there's a lot of people that say it is. There's a lot of people say that it helps you focus. It even helps with cardio. I mean, there's marathon runners, and there's almost like not weed Olympics, but there's like a whole bunch of activities that are dedicated to smoking. I think Carl Kingsbury, he's a part of that. He goes and they all like run and they're high and they say they feel great and they're able to do things that they normally wouldn't be. Joe Rogan on his podcast is talking about it, and like pool players and just a whole bunch of things, all right? That's neither here nor there. The point is, all right, even if you look at weed as a performance-enhancing drug, right, and you think it should be illegal and all that kind of stuff, it was not proven how much was in Nick's system. Knowing that, how can you be so confident and say, right, well, the test results are blurry, we don't have anything black and white, boom, we're going to give you 5 years. And then you got Pat Lundvall, who was saying, well, I'm thinking of giving him a lifetime ban. That's ridiculous. I mean, look, if it was maybe 12 months, I wouldn't be as outraged, because it's like, well, you can't fight City Hall. I come to expect that from the commissions. Even though the test results were blurry, and technically there's no proof, so to speak, that he did break the rules. But if the results are that blurry and you're that confident you're giving 5 years, it's absolutely ridiculous. There were many moments during the hearing where it was clear that Pat Lundvall was taking things personally and looking to wield her power over Nick and make an example of him. The most obvious was when she suggested that lifetime ban. And the thing is, it's a different story if somebody clearly tested positive for steroids and showed the same attitude which the commission, which led the commission to believe that they were going to test positive again. But again, this isn't steroids. I feel like Anderson Silva, they base a lot of their decisions off, oh, we don't like your attitude, blah, 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 you're not playing ball, you're disrespectful. I feel like Anderson Silva showed us just as much, quote-unquote disrespect at his hearing, with seemingly far-fetched stories and excuses and his lawyer appearing to have no idea what he was doing. The commission basically politely told Anderson and his lawyer that they didn't believe him, and yet he got 12 months for steroids. Not weed, steroids. So where's the consistency? If you look at Anderson Silva's attitude and or Nick Diaz, and they say, well, we don't like your attitude, we're not impressed here, we're going to give you 5 years, and yet Anderson Silva does steroids, allegedly, and they give him 12 months, I can't understand it.
For sure. And I mean, Nick Diaz chose not to speak, but it was his constitutional right not to. I mean, you're going to punish a person because he doesn't want to go up on a stand and speak. It's in your constitution. A guy can plead the fifth if he wants to. So it's just a mess. It's almost come to a point now, because these things are televised. The commission just gets the fighters there and just tries to embarrass them and say negative things about them. And they know everybody's watching, so that they're wielding the power and showing everyone how powerful they are. And it's almost like back in the day, a long, long time ago, where there's a king and he just does whatever he wants. I mean, these guys need a system where if we think they've done something ridiculous, then they have to pay for it. I mean, there's just no way around it. And what annoys me is, we just spoke about it with Frank Trigg. There's guys like Steve Mazzagatti, guys like that, who should be slapped on the wrist or get some kind of suspension or something for terrible jobs done. And then you got the other side of the coin, where guys like Nick Diaz, who apart from everything that he did, fans love watching him, and he's great for the sport in the sense that he sells tickets and gets people excited to fight. And now his career is pretty much over. It's just ludicrous. I mean, it's just ludicrous. There's no way around it. I know a lot of people say, look, weed is a performance enhancer, but it's not a steroid, and this whole thing just looks ridiculous. I hope they're able to figure something out with Nick Diaz, because imagine, Cass, if he never fights again because of this whole thing. I mean, it would just blow my mind.
Well, that's a very real possibility, because a lot of people think, Nick Diaz going to court and appealing this thing is a slam dunk. It's not. A lot of government bodies, they generally stick together. It's very rare that you see them admit, okay, we're wrong. I think it's actually going to be a lot tougher than Nick Diaz's lawyers think. I hope, I've got all my fingers and toes crossed, that this somehow gets reversed and we can see some justice. I've got a couple more facts, and then I'll sort of shut up about it. It's crazy, because a lot of people have lost so much respect for the Athletic Commission. A lot of people have left the Vanderlei Silva bandwagon, but I feel as if a lot of his rants have gained credibility, if only for the fact that he has claimed that the commissions need watchdogs and somebody to make sure that they're doing the right thing. He's said a whole bunch of things in his videos, but one of the things that he always sort of hammered home was that these guys abuse their power, these guys think they can do anything they want to, and they can't. I think in that sense, he's absolutely right. And I'll finish by saying this. The thing that I hate most about that hearing is that the commission acknowledged that Nick Diaz's lawyers did a great job. They acknowledged that they brought on good points, but they still decided to give him the harsh sentence, and Pat Lundvall even suggested to give the lifetime ban. I can't understand it. If you go into a courtroom and you're in trial for murder, and their reasoning was for the attitude. If you go into a courtroom and you're in trial for murder, the judge can't say, well, your lawyer has proven you didn't kill anybody. You were in Tokyo during the time of the murder, which took place in America. But I don't like your attitude, and you show me disrespect, so I'm locking you away, and you're guilty of murder. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So
it's not a principal's office in high school where you sit down and you get all these punishments, and that's what it feels like. It feels like Nick Diaz was sitting in the principal's office, and they just don't like his attitude and just trying to destroy him. And I mean, here's the other thing the fans may not realize: Nick Diaz is spending a hell of a lot of money on this whole thing. He's got the $165,000 fine. Then he's got to pay for all the law stuff. He's got to pay. There's all these fines around that. let's not forget he was crap with paying his taxes, so he spent all his money on that. By the end of it, he may find himself, using up most of the money that he saved with his career, not being able to fight again and make more money. I mean, that will be one of the saddest things about it. The fact that after a whole career of entertaining fans, all of his money is going to be spent on trying to fight these stupid allegations, and the fact that he's not going to be left with very much at all. I mean, it's just crazy, Cass. That's what it is. It's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Look, guys, I think that's enough from us for another week. We hope you enjoyed the show. It's a completely different format. Next episode, we'll be back to the regular format. Guests galore, and more guests. And then we'll be breaking down the next event, which I believe next week is UFC Japan, Barnett versus Nelson. So good times to come. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Give us a like on Facebook. That is facebook.com/submissionradioAUS. Of course, if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, subscribe. If you haven't seen our coverage of UFC 193, the Q&A, the press conference, or the Ronda Rousey clips, etc., go on YouTube. There's plenty of stuff coming this week. Technique of the Week is out every single Wednesday. I believe these are the ones that we're kicking off for this Wednesday are actually Jake Matthews doing techniques, and he's got MMA stuff, he's got BJJ stuff. Some striking stuff as well, which I know people have been asking for, so good things to come. We've actually still got more footage from the UFC 193 press conference. There's a few videos coming out. One of them, I'll give you a hint. Okay, I'll spoil the whole thing. One of them is going to be Ronda Rousey basically getting absolutely mobbed by fans. There's some crazy stuff with fans absolutely bawling their eyes out. And then another one, we're putting together a video basically of the view inside Etihad Stadium. So if you're listening internationally, or even if you're an Aussie and you're like, well, I don't know what to expect, we basically documented what Etihad Stadium looks like, the views, the inside, the outside, etc., so it's going to be a cool little clip. Plenty of stuff coming. Now, before we wrap up, Dennis, I got to ask you, it's tradition, man. Any last words for the fans?
Well, no movie reviews this week, but we'll say this, Cass. One of those Ronda Rousey clips was me asking her a question about the fight. Didn't quite play out the way I thought it would, in a positive way. Ronda was talking a lot about Holly Holm coming at her and coming at her face, which led to sexual innuendo. And the clips made its way around the world across all the different various websites. People ask, Submission Radio, but are you a bunch of cheeky devils? We're not. We're just trying to ask the right questions, guys. But we're happy when these things happen. We'll see if we can get any more sexual innuendo maybe out of Mark Hunter Bigfoot Silver. Until then, that's all we've got.
I feel like it's the end of the last, The Usual Suspects, where at the end it's like, it was me all along. It was you. You were the... Everybody's seen that video by now, but nobody really knows the origins. It was Dennis all along. Dennis and his cheeky bastard question. That's it for another week, guys. We'll be back next week. Stay safe.